How do you deal with a man that is more sensitive than you?
It gets strange for me in conversations like these when we talk about one party being more sensitive or more soft. And a lot of times that kind of boxes men in, and it's alarming because if a man can't be sensitive and soft in his relationship, then where can he be? Like I don't know too many men that don't want to take their guard down with their old lady. Like I don't want to have to come home and protect myself from you. Like do you know what I gotta go through out in the world, and then to have to come home and guard and tiptoe with you because I can't be vulnerable? Like even when we use the word soft, bruh, a man being hard all the time will destroy him. Get you a man that gotta be hard all the time and see how he handle you. Brother, a man has to find softness in himself to properly handle those parts of you. Empathy is like a huge quality that's necessary for a healthy partnership. And in order to empathize, one almost has to see oneself. And if a man can't see himself in your emotions, if he can't see himself in your softness, then again, what do you think he's going to do? So when you talk about not wanting a man that's more sensitive than you, that's you falling into training that cuts pieces of a man off. And then you complain about those pieces being missing when he show up at your doorstep.
How do you deal with a man that is more sensitive than you?
Listen, hey guys, welcome to Little Blackbird 91. We're going to have a little panel. Myself and Sean will be on in a few minutes talking more about this situation, which is, can men be sensitive in 2023? Are they allowed to be sensitive? Are they allowed to, are they allowed to, as a woman say, can we be more sensitive than the women in a sense, right? Or let me not say that, because that puts a presupposition already. Can men be sensitive is that question they're asking. And I think this question is really interesting because we spoke about yesterday Tabari coming on to the show and expressing himself and, sorry, 2024, you're right, and I put 2023. Thank you for changing that for me. I forget we're in a new year. And, we talk about expressing yourself and being allowed to share your thoughts and your feelings, right? And I think what's really interesting about it is that when it comes to men, specifically, I do believe that men can be sensitive in some shape or form, right? But that question that she's asking in that situation is quite interesting because she asks it in comparison. What happens if a man is more sensitive than the woman? So actually, there can be several positions that could be taken on this particular conversation. And one of the angles that can be taken on this situation is when she's asking it, saying when a man is more sensitive, is she desensitized? That is a question we can also ask. It's not just one angle. There is a truth behind it. But when she asks the question, she asks, what happens if the man is more sensitive than the woman? Well, is she desensitized? Because that's also an aspect of when someone is desensitized, a woman, when she sees a man being sympathetic or empathetic, being quote-unquote sensitive in this aspect, that becomes a problem for that person. There's also another aspect, which is that genuinely, the man may be very sensitive in the aspect when it comes to his emotions. He may be, and when we say sensitive here, what people really mean is that he's easily offended and easily hurt, and also that, that he responds to situations with a lot of emotion rather than quote unquote, they might say logic, but I'd rather say rather than bringing a solution forward, right? So his first go-to is to be emotional in that moment rather than being solution-orientated, okay? So when we say about being sensitive. So I think there is more than one side to this angle. And then there's going to be people in the middle who are going to complain and make this a gender war and say about, well, men, women will say men in 2023, 2024 are sassy and sensitive and, they want to be women. And there's going to be men out there going to say, well, women say they want a man to be more vulnerable, more open and more talkative. And when we do, then they throw it back in our faces. And I think the reality and the truth is this. I think there's a balance between the two, the different opinions and different sides. I think there is a healthy balance, right? I think there's a balance in terms of, if I look at it from one perspective, as a man, for what I understand, there are times where I need to shut my mouth. And what that means is this: we're going through something, but I may need to keep quiet about this situation just yet. If I haven't got a handle on it yet, maybe I need to keep quiet and just kind of process the information first, rather than adding my partner to it. Maybe just yet. Let me figure it out first. You know what I mean? So that my initial response isn't a mad one, right? That could also be one aspect. But the other aspect is that you can share that information with your partner and let them carry part of the load, because that's the whole point of being in a relationship. And if you've chosen the right type of woman, then when you do communicate with that woman, it should be a place where it's a safe space. So there's a bit of both. I think there is a need for vulnerability from the man to the woman, and the women need to allow us some space to be vulnerable. But I also think there's a time in season 2 where it gets to a point where there's no need for transparency here. I can't talk about this situation because it will put a dent in your mind. It will put a bit of fear in your mind. It might put a bit of weight on your mind. And as women tend to try and not in a bad way, try to take over and try to help. And sometimes the help becomes more annoying than actual trying to solve the issue. Okay, so I think there's several different angles to look at this situation about best practice, about how we handle things in relationship aspect. I will say this: when I was younger, definitely was far more sensitive. I can't lie to you. I was very sensitive as a kid. And when I say sensitive, what I really mean is I was wounded. And you guys hear me use that word a lot. I was very much emotionally wounded. So any kind of hurt or pain, sometimes a joke, I might be able to take it too seriously. You know, if my partner said it, and then my reaction would be one that would be petulant or for a temper tantrum, or I would be avoidant, or I would separate myself or detach or whatever. That would almost end up as a punishment in response to when I feel offended or hurt. And when with that, and when that happens, the other party found it to be that I was too quote unquote sensitive. And at the time, I never saw it like that. I only saw it as you don't want a man that's vulnerable. You don't want a man, and at this point I was probably very, very young, so maybe the word vulnerable. We don't want a man that is in touch with his emotions, right? But when I look back at it, there's a point that she has here, right? Being easily offended leaves no room for also the other party to be able to joke, to laugh, to have fun. And a part of the relationship also is that you have a bit of fun with each other. Sometimes you poke a bit of fun with each other. But when there's insecurities, unfortunately, okay, when you have a bunch of insecurities, that becomes a big problem. That becomes a really big problem. So, I think in this instance, when you have to be aware of where you yourself are you in the best position possible when you are dealing with somebody. Because like I said, when I was younger, I was very sensitive. I can't even lie to you, very, very sensitive. But I wouldn't have called it that at the time. And it's just the way that I handled situations. I was a little bit too. I want to say my first response was one that was unregulated in the emotional department. And therefore, the action that came about that place, whilst I might have been right in my offense and feeling offended and feeling how you feel, what was the action that was taken? And I think that's very much more important. That's where we need to be looking at as men specifically when we're talking about men's panel and being sensitive, of course. And I'll change the title because I know it's 2024, but I keep putting 2023 for some reason because, 2024 is only just started, you know what I mean? But yeah, I think it's important to understand, right? So, but it's because there's often offense that's a tie to it. That's why we're talking about the sensitive man, right? In that aspect. But like I said, there is two sides to it. There is the sensitive man, but there are women out there who aren't sensitive enough. And usually the two parties meet. The man that's too sensitive, or should I say the man that's way too in touch with his, being wounded and being insulted, being hurt and being offended all the time. And then there's a man and a woman that is, that doesn't seem to even see the emotions or stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of different angles. I mean, Sean will probably have a great conversation about this and be able to share some of our experiences as well. as well. And I guess Ebony Knowledge said, obviously, I psychoanalyze a bit too much. Yeah, you could be right. I probably do. This is why the whole channel is here. We psychoanalyze. You know, I find when people say the most obvious things, it really blows my mind. You're on this channel because we psychoanalyze. Why else are you here? You didn't come for any other reason. Yeah? So I need to sit tight, keep quiet, shh, don't type too much, listen, open your ears, okay? Yeah, appreciate you. All right, cool. Let me get Sean on, and let's get this conversation flowing. I'm going to play today's conversation once more again. You know I have to do sometimes. You know, sometimes you have to just give them a little sign, ginger them, because I don't know why they're here when they just talk that much. But I'll play the clip again, and we'll get the conversation flowing once more, Sean. Let's go.
It gets strange for me in conversations like these when we talk about one party being more sensitive or more soft, and a lot of times that kind of boxes men in, and it's alarming because if a man can't be sensitive and soft in his relationship, then where can he be? Like I don't know too many men that don't want to take their guard down with their old lady. Like I don't want to have to come home and protect myself from you. Like do you know what I gotta go through out in the world, and then to have to come home and guard and tiptoe with you because I can't be vulnerable? Like even when we use the word soft, bruh, a man being hard all the time will destroy him. Get you a man that gotta be hard all the time and see how he handle you. Brother, a man has to find softness in himself to properly handle those parts of you. Empathy is like a huge quality that's necessary for a healthy partnership. And in order to empathize, one almost has to see oneself. And if a man can't see himself in your emotions, if he can't see himself in your softness, then again, what do you think he's going to do? So when you talk about not wanting a man that's more sensitive than you, that's you falling into training that cuts pieces of a man off. And then you complain about those pieces being missing when he show up at your doorstep.
How do you deal?
All right, sorry, it's a bit choppy there, a little bit choppy in parts there. I apologize. I don't know if you guys actually heard it. Was it able to be heard in bits, or was it a bit too choppy?
No, I think I could hear it. You know, let the audience put it in the chat if they could hear it. I know it was kind of breaking up, but yeah, I got the message. Up a bit.
What's your thoughts on this original question? You know, the original question of you know, talking about men being sensitive. Just when you hear that sentiment, what's your first thoughts to hearing that sentiment? Before we dissect it more and go deeper, what's your first thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's we've had these conversations before, and every time it's the same thing. It's kind of like you have to pick and choose. I think it's also, I mean, we'll dive more into it, but like when I hear it, it's like, you know, guys, you just can't, you know, you can't express yourself. You can't say too much. And it's kind of weaponized when, you know, especially when, you know, you might be having an argument or disagreement with a woman. It's a way to shut you down. Because it's not masculine. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's not necessarily masculine to be sensitive. Those two things we don't think about that. So whenever we're kind of told we're sensitive, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of like something you want to avoid.
No, yeah, no. You know, I think you know, when I first hear the sentiment, you know, that men are sensitive, you know, I think my immediate is to kind of defend it, right? My immediate response is to kind of defend it straight away, like, are men sensitive, and then maybe try to, you know, fire something back, you know what I mean? That's my first sentiment in my head. And then after, I think, like after that, for instance, when we watched that video that just played, when you play that video we just played, I think I get a different perspective, right? I open myself up to more perspectives in the sense of, I try to think, you know, from one perspective and to another perspective. For instance, I try to see, okay, why would a woman be saying that? Is it because the man actually is over sensitive to things that are happening? Or is it a case that she maybe is desensitized? Or is that we both got a screwed up idea when it comes to how we emotionally regulate in the relationship, and actually none of us have got the answer correct. You know what I mean? And we're both got the wrong answer when it comes to how we deal with each other in that relationship. So I think, my immediate response is to try and, you know what I mean? And then after, I think once you settle down, you kind of trying to think about it and just trying to reason through it. It's like, okay, hold on. Maybe there's more to the story here than actually just jumping straight heads in, which is what we've been trying to do in the past few years on this channel. Like you've always said, there's always two sides. So trying to understand that there's both sides and not just going straight for the gender war in a sense.
Yeah, and the thing I liked about this video is because it when the guy was talking from tonight's conversations, it made you think about it even further, to like open up that expanded view about, well, we need to have a level of sensitivity, because the question was birthed from a woman in the audience that came up and said, like, how do we deal with men that are so, I think she asked the question like, how to deal with a man that she's dating or in a relationship with that's more sensitive than her, or just in a general question about men being so much more sensitive than she is. And how he broke it down was excellent, because you want them to be able to relate to you. And I think as we've kind of expanded these conversations over the last few years about men being vulnerable, men expressing themselves, men talking, men being more communicative about their thoughts, emotional intelligence, you have you have this dynamic of there's men just being a lot more vocal than they have been in the past. And I think you have some women maybe interacting with men that are just more vocal. They may tell you something a little more articulately about the way they're feeling about something that you've done in the past, where for some women that's not something they're used to. So when they hear the feedback, they want to dismiss it because they're not used to hearing that. Then you have the other end of the spectrum where you do have men that aren't, and I think somebody put this in the chat too, they don't have the emotional regulation. So as soon as something happens, they fly off the handle, and then they're having, like if their feelings get hurt, they just boom. They just going in and saying, just like whether they're going to argue or, whatever it is, maybe they cry, this like women are like, oh man, these sensitive men out here, you can't say anything. So I think you have a range of things happening. But I think we just need to be cautious that we can't throw everything into one category, because it is leveraged against us. Just the same way I was watching something in preparation for our discussion where there was a speaker, and he was talking about, just the same way that women don't want to be, there's this movement, right? Women don't want to be considered strong, especially Black women, right? They're like, take that off of me, because that's a way that people just keep dumping on me and don't acknowledge, that I too want to be helped, that I too need things. And the strength is birthed out of, things that they had to do to survive, but they don't want to be strong. And I think it's the same way with us when it comes to this sensitivity thing. Yes. Are there times when men can be sensitive or need to be sensitive? Yes, but we don't want that to be the essence of who we are. We're not just sensitive. There are times when we need to tap into that sensitivity, and it doesn't make us any less of a man or, lower on the totem pole because maybe we have sensitivities to one thing or another. Right? We can't live in that space, but there's times when we do need to tap into it and it needs to be okay that we're able to be vulnerable.
No, I definitely hear that, and I think the key part of this situation is that words have words and definitions of those words and the meanings within the culture of the time, right? So, for instance, when you say someone is sensitive, there's often a negative connotation applied to it. You get what I'm saying to you? And then when it comes to like, for instance, sensitivity, soft. Often those words have a negative connotation to it. So when someone uses it, oftentimes it's in conjunction with an insult. So then it becomes very difficult for the party who's being called that to be able to accept that, okay, maybe there's a positive aspect to this. And this goes for both the person receiving it and the person sending it. But it becomes difficult because there's negative connotations that are attached to it. And so in some sense, being sensitive just means being the ability to respond to the slight changes in the environment, right? So if I'm seeing my girl upset, I'm going to be sensitive to the change, right? But we wouldn't put it that way because it's not used in that way. So now when you label the person as being sensitive, it's a negative, and there's no positives that oftentimes can be attached to it because the negative often overrules. But you're right. I mean, listen, look, I think with both when it comes to men and women and how they're responding to one another, like that woman that asked that question, I think it's also dependent upon the people within the relationship. But we often do try to generalize a standard. Let's just be honest, right? We say there's a limit or a bar, or at least, a barometer that we look by, that we operate and say, okay, maybe that's a bit too much. Like we've said before, when we said with Zach a couple of seasons ago on Married at First Sight, right? We said there's a barometer. He was crying too much. And it is an indication that something potentially is wrong here. That you as a man crying so much. In fact, if that was a woman, would be concerned too, because you're crying a hell of a lot. We haven't even got nowhere, and he's crying at every turn. And that then tells us there's something not quite right. So I think, there's always a base level that we work with, which is oftentimes defined by the culture that we're in. And then when we work with that aspect, we kind of look at that baseline and go, okay, if you're below that baseline, something's wrong. If you're too high above it, something's also wrong. There's a medium that we tend to look for within the constructs of when it comes to sensitivity. And if you're really honest, that's just life in general. And my final point on that is, when you play a game console, you tend to, there's a section of settings where it goes your control sensitivity, right? Now, you don't want your control sensitivity too much, because then you just be doing all of this. But you don't want to be too low, and it fails to respond. So there is a medium that we're happy with when it comes to both men and women, when it comes to sensitivity, that women, I'm assuming, would want from men, because it helps to regulate the relationship. Go for it, Sean.
Yeah, and I think it's about finding that balance. And I think the thing is that we just need to be cautious that as soon as we see something that is slightly different than maybe what the norm is, that we throw it in one category or the other. And I think that's where the problem happens, right? Because I think whatever that, I don't know the specifics of what that young lady was saying about what made that man overly sensitive, but I would love to hear more about that, because sometimes, and we do this all the time, when we can't process it or we don't understand it, then we can dismiss it. So we'll throw it in a category. And I saw somebody put this in a comment too, which is, a fair point, but also we just need to be cautious, right? They were like, we don't mind a man that's sensitive and in tune with their emotions, but we don't want a sassy man. Well, are we just lumping everybody into the sassy category because we don't agree with what they say? Because that happens too. And we've seen that happen very recently. So I just think like we can have fun and we poke fun and have jest with some of these terms. But in real life, they do color our opinions. So I think that like that sensitivity level that you're talking about in the games, right? We know somewhere we kind of have a general sense of what is okay or what is acceptable. But we can't just throw everything in that, default of, it's too much, it's too extreme, or they're being sassy, or they're being overly sensitive, and it's just too much for me. So I think, as a society, we just have to be acknowledged. You have to be knowledgeable of that. And I think his point in talking about this is like, before we jump down the bandwagon, as soon as we see someone that may be overly expressive or overly talk about their feelings, let's not get to that point first. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's exercise empathy, because when the shoe is on the other foot, and that's empathy, right? When the shoe is on the other foot and you're sitting in that seat and you want the man to be able to hear you, listen to you, but he's like, because men will do this too. And this is, I land my plane here. We do this too. We'll be like, well, it's facts, right? We'll say, well, it's facts. And then maybe a woman might say, well, this is how I felt, or this is how you made me feel. Or we're like, facts aren't feelings. That's a very easy way to dismiss how somebody is feeling and how they process their, what they experienced, whatever it was, big or small. So I think we just need to be cautious on the same side, because you want empathy in that moment when you're just talking about how you feel, versus saying, well, the fact is this never happened, and tell me the truth, what actually happened. We can get down to that, but sensitivity and empathy comes into the fact of just giving someone the space to feel how they felt and understanding what they're going through.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. I think I remember I had a situation quite recently, and in a situation, I expressed some thoughts and how I felt about the situation, and I felt a little bit like the feelings were slightly dismissed, and before that, even that point. I think the way I handled it, no, I don't think I know. The way I handled it wasn't the correct way I handled it, right? The first initial response, I was angry, and the way I walked off, right, wasn't going to help the situation, right? Because I should have just said, listen, hey, look, I'm not feeling it at the moment, let's have a conversation. But I was like, F this, I'm walking off. I'm not about this mood. I'm in a mood, I'm pissed. When we had a conversation, obviously, I explained why I felt the way I felt. And in that moment, in that moment, there's two things always happening. I think in my head is sometimes, and again, maybe some men can really identify this. If you're not used to people actually hearing your emotions or hearing your thoughts or your feelings, you're used to people dismissing you. You're ready for when someone's about to dismiss you. And people have a number of different ways of knowing how to dismiss your emotions and your feelings as a man, that come in many different ways. And so I think for me personally, when the situation was taking place, part of my brain was already thinking, this person's going to dismiss what I'm saying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no matter how I'm going to explain it, and when you're dealing with women too, there's always this, and women don't kill me now. You know what I mean? We're not doing gender wars today. We really just want to be a real conversation. Sometimes once you explain how you're hurt by what they did, sometimes women like to change the dynamic of what happened and make it about your expression. So let's say I'm frustrated by something, and let's say I threw my hands in the air. She's gonna make it about you throwing your hands in the air and not about what happened and what led up to that moment as to why you're frustrated in that moment. I'm not saying all women do this, by the way. I'm not saying all women do this, and I'm not saying that it's every time women do this. It's just something that we've experienced from my particular perspective. And they change the beef from being about how you're frustrated to being about your expression of your frustration. So now you're apologizing for your expression before you can even get to a point of actually now working through how you feel. And at that point, when you're now working through what you feel, you're already frustrated because you've already had to concede so much ground in your expression. And that doesn't mean that every expression that you have is correct, right? We have to be aware of that too. Let's hold space for that too. But, you can spend a lot of time trying to wrestle that point of view, and it takes a lot of energy then away from the main point of contention. And what will happen is, and again, I say this, with all kindness, what will happen is, and I've said this before, and it's a lesson I've had to learn, and I'm learning over and over again, she remembers how she feels and not actually the facts of what happened. So now, all that's left is, he made me feel like this. So even if you were right, you're still wrong. And it's, I've started to get to a place where I'm not angry anymore, because the Bible says, dwell with women according to knowledge. I've begun to understand that they deal with things differently to how we operate. And if I'm gonna be in any type of friendship, relationship, whatever with women, you have to understand how they operate slightly differently to us as men. And once you can get an understanding, you have more empathy and space to know that there's a different way you got to operate with them. It just is what it is, and it's painful because it's painful to be in that position, because I think you feel like I just want to be heard in that moment, but in reality, there's a different way of going about things when it comes to men and women relationships, which we spoke about last time. Go for it, Sean.
Yeah, I think, what you just described is a deflection. And I think, we had that conversation a little bit when we were talking about the Ready to Move reunion. And we were kind of going back and forth about Stormy and why she cried and why she ran off the stage. And I think that whether it's some things are right on the surface and then some things are like in the subconscious and our default behaviors that we go to when we want to avoid accountability, whether it's overt or not. And I think one of those things that women may do and have done in the past is, instead of dealing with the actual thing that the man is saying, they're going to go to, oh, you're being a little too demonstrative, or, they won't use that word, but I'm just using that word to capture the feeling. Or they'll say, oh, you're raising your voice, when they know it's a difference when you're excited or you're elevated because you're expressing a point, and when I'm yelling at you, right? When I'm saying, Kojo, I'm sick of you, blah, 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 and we having a full-on argument. That's different when I'm like, yo, this is what's happening, and I'm trying to explain myself, and I'm just getting excited because there's tension, there's excitement there. And I think a lot of times people's default, because they don't want to hear what the person is saying, they're going to say, oh, you're being too sensitive, or, you're raising your voice, and now you got to spend time, okay, let me calm down. Now I have to get here. So now I have to get to a place where you're comfortable when I'm really the one that's bothered. And I think people don't, and I think this is the part, and I know Ebony, is really going through whatever she's going through in the comments, but this is not that kind of conversation. And sis, what we would implore of you is, like, we're just talking here, right? And the whole idea, like, the first part of this conversation was empathy, right? So we would just ask you to just demonstrate some empathy for us while we're trying to have this conversation. So put yourself in our shoes as we're trying to communicate a topic that is a little difficult, that comes with a little level of vulnerability for men to sit here and talk about sensitivities and talk about some of the negative experiences. So we would just ask that you just kind of give us a little safe space. Let us flesh the conversation out. We're trying not to be toxic, right? Because this is what happens. And these are how, this is how we get into it, because we're not even going to be able to get into the conversation we're trying to have, because then it's going to be an hour of devoted on having a fight, or, a tete-a-tete back and forth with you, Ebony. And we don't want to do that, because this is going to distract from the entire topic. And this happens in relationships. So, I think that is the crux of what sometimes people will do, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, is they're going to default to, hey, this is what's happening, or like they don't want to have that conversation, because if they really listen to you, like if you're bringing something to your woman and saying, hey, listen, I don't like that you did this. When you said that hurt my feelings. That means that there's a level of accountability in that conversation, where if she hears you and is truly listening, she's going to have to change the behavior that she did. And that means that she's going to have to acknowledge that she made a mistake. And sometimes we just don't want to do that. And it's human behavior. I'm not saying only women do this and men don't. No, we all do it. But I think it's just having that level of knowledge, like, hey, if somebody's bringing an issue to me, unless they're like really coming at me wrong, let me just give them space to communicate in a way that works.
I love that as well. And I think, and just to even balance the story that I gave. So in that situation, I actually apologized to her first. Because something that I was learning, again, is, like I said, that Bible scripture, dwell with women according to knowledge. And so in that situation, when I reviewed the tape, I said, my initial response, if I'm thinking about long term, I'm thinking about the maintenance of a relationship, if I'm thinking about how men and women respond differently sometimes to different behaviors, then let me apologize first for that response, right? Because in some sense, it was a temper tantrum. In a sense, the way that first initial storming out, I mean, like, ugh, right? Rather than be like, hey, look, right now, maybe we can't talk right now, but we're going to talk about this later on, right? It was a temper tantrum. So it was a failure of emotional regulation in that immediate moment. And so I had to apologize for that, because I know that is going to be the lasting impression no matter what, right? No matter if the person's wrong, and no matter how wrong they are, all they're going to remember is that immediate moment. Point in case, a little bit later on, when we discussed it, it came up in conversation again, that situation, right? So when we're discussing it, that point of view was, all she can remember was me and that moment. And I said to her, I appreciate you sharing that, and this is why I wanted to meet you face to face so we can talk about the conversation situation, because if we did it over the phone, it's probably going to go left again. But now you can see me, you can see my face, you can see how I am, it's calm, right? But I want to be able to express that whilst I'm apologizing for that immediate response, it doesn't take away from the actual situation of how we got to this point in the conversation, right? I'm still hurt by what you did. It doesn't take away from that. You know what I'm saying to you? I'm still frustrated about what happened, and I'm still angry about what happened. Do you get what I'm saying to you, right? So I want you to understand that whilst I'm apologizing for that initial response, it doesn't take away from your actions. So we're not removing this. You're not scapegoated because I've done what I've done in the beginning by having a temper tantrum, quote unquote. So there's accountability that can be held on both sides, right? Because how I handle something can make me wrong, even though I'm right. And so that's why it's always about the balance. And this is why I was saying that it was an important lesson for me. So when I told the person, I was like, no, we're not going to talk about the phone. I'm going to meet you face to face so that we can sort this out, right? Because we're beefing over this stupid thing, right? So if we're going to talk face to face, I want to let you know, I want you to see me, see my eyes, see my body posture, see my body language. It's not the same as it was then. Because one thing about anger or frustration, especially from a man to a woman, is that it looks different. Oftentimes because there is a power dynamic between men and women, regardless of whether we like it or not. You know, whether I like it or not, I'm a big dude. You know what I mean? Even if I don't swing my arms, even if I don't point in your face, even if I don't, the mere fact I'm angry can look a little bit more differently. So I have to be aware of that, and that the impression I can give through that anger. Now that doesn't take away from the fact that I'm angry, I'm frustrated and hurt. It just means that there's a way that I'm going to have to deal with things in a more different plight and a different way. And so once I apologized, I said, but hey, still, this is how I feel about the situation, X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. And then we came to a great place. And it taught me one of the greatest lessons. Because if you're dealing, let's say, obviously that's my friend, but let's say if I was dealing with a partner, this is the way I have to handle things, right? And this is why I go back to that scripture. Dwell with women according to knowledge. Understand that they deal with things differently to us. It's not for me now to get angry and say, whoa, because sometimes what we can do, like you said, bro, is facts over feelings. But you have to remember, facts don't trump necessarily feelings, because in fact, if the person deals with feelings, it can't trump, because that's how they're going to operate. So it doesn't trump anything. We see things differently, and we have to be able to understand where each person's coming from. So I have to be able to understand your perspective, you understand my perspective. And so in that moment, when you're looking at it, you go, okay, I hear it, I see it, apologize for that, here's my perspective, da, da, da. And the person was able to receive what I said once that conversation had. So now you're in a different place, and it's in a much calmer place. But not only that, you almost have to, because the lasting impression, especially when it comes to men and women, is that once they have an impression of you being frustrated or whatever, that's often the thing that sticks in their head. So you almost have to come as reverse engineer it. So it's a tough one. And I'm saying that from a perspective, if you care about your partner, you care about your friend that's from the opposite sex, you have to be able to care about this. If you don't care about your partner, your friend, don't listen to what we're saying. You go and do whatever you want to do, because at that point, you'll see what happens. It won't last long. Because we found out ourselves, Sean. We, you know what I mean? So we can tell you for free, you're going to have to care. You can't say I don't care.
Yeah, and I think, at a certain point, it's like you have to, and we've talked about this before, it's like figuring out is it more about being right and being wrong, or is it more about truly coming to a place of understanding and realizing you don't have to dig your heels in so hard on one particular thing or the next. And I think that's when we're able to navigate these conversations and solve real issues. Because yes, could it be that when a man is communicating his hurt feelings or something that bothered him, we need to temper it? Yeah, that's something that we can definitely address and deal with. But we also need to solve for that hurt, the original root cause of what took place. And I think it's if I know, if I come to the conversation or the disagreement, both parties in good faith, like, hey, I know that they probably weren't going after me to hurt me, or if whatever I'm going into this where I think that I can be hurt, and then that person on the other end is like, hey, I realize that Sean, is not just a person out here trying to, be X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to hear what he's saying and be open to whatever he's presenting to me, although it may not be something that I want to hear or something personal about me. And I think that's how we get to that resolve. But we get to this, we get to these terms and these trigger words when people don't always operate in their relationships with good faith, or the presumption is, I got to defend my point and I can't be wrong, or I don't feel like if somebody's telling me I did something wrong, then that means that I'm a bad person. And I don't, I think we need to move away from that. People have so many different layers. We make mistakes. And if we make a critical mistake or a critical error, doesn't necessarily mean that we are a bad person. It just means that we've done something wrong that needs to be dealt with. And I think it's just having that level of openness, and then we both can kind of navigate, okay, I can understand for future reference. Next time when I bring something to you, maybe I want to dial it down a little bit. Maybe I want to pick the time when we have the conversation so that we're both able to communicate effectively with one another.
Yeah, no, and I think the great thing about this is, like you're saying, is it always comes down to understanding in situations as well, right? And Cece put here, yeah, people attribute, being wrong with self-worth. And that's why it can feel like an attack. And this is why sometimes having the argument, especially in relationships, romantic, or even friendships where there's a close-knit friendship of a relationship between the people, is that what can happen is that quickly understanding can be lost because people get heightened in their emotions, and sometimes the argument can't be had or the discussion can't be had in that immediate moment because people are not willing to open themselves up to being wrong or having a different position. And sometimes you have to be aware of that, right? So and that can be very difficult too, right? Because again, people have different sensitivities, and when you're having those conversations, you have to be aware that sometimes time and season is also important for certain comments to be made, right? And so I think the key part of this is, as we're saying, do women want men to be sensitive in 2024, sorry. I think the key part is how you look at sensitivity. Do you have a positive regard when it comes to sensitivity? Do you see it as a positive thing, right? And how is it being used? I think it's good to be sensitive. I think it's good to be aware. I think it's good to be present, and I think it's good to be able to respond to some of the changes, in the conversation. And I think that is an important part, an important skill that we as individuals need to have. But specifically at me, I want to say for us as men, that sensitivity is not a bad thing. Being able to respond to immediate changes in your environment, i.e. the person that's with you or around you, it's also critical skills in determining how to lead a home, how to lead your business, how to lead your family, how to lead whatever. Relationship, friendships, it's also really important too. So I think it's men should be sensitive. Someone said there, as long as it's paired with emotional intelligence and regulation and empathy, beautiful. Yes, as long as it is paired with those things, then it's always a win. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about emotional intelligence, did a few episodes. So, yeah, I definitely see that aspect as well,
Yeah, and I think, listen, we're having our own our own little moment in the chat, and I think these things are good. And I don't want to, I know some of the ladies are in the chat that are moderators. I would just ask, we don't need to, we don't need to block Ebony Knowledge. I don't think she's being out of pocket and disrespectful. I just think sometimes we have to know I say this all the time, when to hold them and when to fold them. And sometimes you're at a point of a discussion where it's heightened, or it could be a disagreement where we're just not going to see what each other is saying. And then we just spend too much time trying to defend a point that's really not anything that we need to defend. And I think, like, when you get to that level, and again, that comes from being emotionally regulated. And I think, again, Ebony, we understand that. And perhaps you didn't intend to tussle, but your comments were making, I don't want to speak for Kojo, but it was just starting to make us want to tussle. Was definitely wanting to make me wanting to defend my brother, wanting to defend the point, wanting to like move past it. So so that's where the empathy part, where I asked you earlier, where I asked you for some empathy for us, is to just kind of like, taper it down. We're probably not going to agree on how this whole conversation with you and Kojo and the whole thing started. Sometimes you just got to move around from it. Especially in a greater group. So I think that was a perfect example of sensitivity can come out, right? Because if you're touching on somebody's button, although you may not intend to be doing it, sometimes you're doing that. And you just need to hear what the person is asking of you, to just dial it back and just respect them out of empathy. Might not be your intentions, but that's how it's making the person feel. That's all. Listen, it's not really a big deal to me. But I just know that sometimes this has happened so often when we have these men's panels. We present a topic and then we get to tussling. And I don't want 2024 to be like that. We're going to say some things, might upset some people, but we don't want to intentionally spend time in a negative place where we're fighting and going back and forth unnecessarily, because it doesn't get us anywhere. And Ebony, I know you've been on this channel before. I've seen your name several times. So I think we're just at an impasse. So let's just not get there. It's not necessary. I don't think your intentions are to be disruptive, but it can be. But back to the topic at hand, I think this is like, so what happens is, because it takes for us to have emotional intelligence, because now that this door is open, right, for men to be more communicative, for men to have podcasts and YouTube channels and mics to speak, we're doing more of it. But the next step from being free to talk more than we've probably done in the past is now, how do we talk? How do we use our voices? How are we conscious of the way in which we communicate?
I think it's really good. I think this could be a really good example, though. Like you mentioned, it's a really good example in terms of the conversation between men and women and sensitivities and stuff like that. Because the actual situation, shout out to Ebony as well, actually started with the critique of the actual channel. And I was like, then why are you here? Like it seemed like it was counterproductive. And I think that's what sometimes can happen in a conversation, that people can get frustrated, because when we're making comments and it becomes counterproductive, people then start seeing you as, why are we doing what we're doing? Like, for instance, and then we're talking about obviously words and the culture behind it, right? A hit dog's gonna holler. Now, if we're having a conversation and someone says that in a conversation, that's only going to heighten the conversation. It's never going to bring it down, right? It's never going to. And this is where both men and women have to start being more aware about things that are going to trigger the other party, right? Both men and women both need to be aware of the sensitivities of both men and women, right? If I know that this is a sensitive area, like I was saying, having a conversation with a friend, and we had an argument before that, right? And I wasn't paying attention, and she was saying something that was very sensitive to her, and I started laughing. I was like, this is too funny. This is too funny. The story you're telling me is too funny. And she's like, no, it's a sensitive spot for me. And I'm like, what? In my head, I'm like, how is this a sensitive spot for you? It's a funny story what you're telling me. But she's telling me it's a sensitive spot. I continue laughing. It turns into an argument. Now I got to apologize, right? Because you have to understand that what's not sensitive for me may be sensitive for you. You know what I mean? Now, of course, there were going to be different levels of sensitivity that some people are going to be saying I'm okay with, and I'm not going to be able to do whatever, right? But if you're going to be in relation with somebody, there has to be an understanding that there are sensitivities on both sides, and saying certain things are going to heighten the conversation, heighten the emotion, heighten the frustration and the hurt on the other side. So if my job is to communicate with you and get this point across, I'm not trying to get you more pented up, or you more frustrated, because then my point doesn't get heard. You know what I'm saying to you? So sometimes I'm saying this for both men and women, but let's say, for instance, one of men, sometimes I go into some of the far right men's panels, right? And before you know it, when a woman comes up, the immediate thing that comes up is an insult. Immediately. And you're like, well, what did you, it's like, when you do that straight away, how is that an inviting space for someone to come and share their perspective that's different to yours, or give you some wisdom from their perspective? You know what I'm saying to you? So when you start off with immediate negativity, right, in a conversation, you've already started creating an atmosphere for that particular place. So let me give you an example of what such a happened. Like when I said I used that example of the argument I had with my friend, and about the way that we handle things, and I had to apologize, right? One of the things I also understood was atmospheres, okay? That setting a tone and an atmosphere. So when I met the person in person, I said, first of all, let me hug you, and let me say this is still a safe place, and I still got love for you. You understand? I stated that, I said, before we talk about anything else, before I say my piece, before you say your piece, before we get to saying the hurtful things that both of us might have done, I hugged the person. I said, listen, I got love for you. It's still a safe space. Because I want to make sure the atmosphere is correct. So we start that foundation of conversation from that place. So that the conversation grows in that particular way. But when you don't set that tone and that atmosphere, it immediately goes left. Because the tone is already set for negativity. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to wrestle it back into play. So that's why I'm saying that as a man specifically, I take it on as a leader, that I try to set an atmosphere that's not going to be one that's going to be tussling. So when I put the video on today, the reason why I went on to Ebony straight away was I immediately criticized myself by saying, given my example of when I was a younger man, how I was sensitive and how it could be looked upon by the other woman, that actually, no, she was right. I was wrong. I was too sensitive. And as I said that, she was like, you criticize everybody else, not yourself. What? Were you listening? And then you start realizing the person's not paying attention. They've already come in with an agenda and a thought process. That's what made me immediately say to the person, I need you to pay attention, I need you to listen, because you're already starting on the wrong foot, and the atmosphere was set immediately that this is not the place for that. We want to have a good conversation, and we want to be able to build from that conversation to say that both men and women are going to benefit from this conversation. Just because a men's panel doesn't mean that women can't benefit and men can't benefit. You know what I mean? So that is why actually the conversation, why I think it's a great example of Ebony, because I immediately had already criticized myself, but the person wasn't listening. They wanted to come and nuke me straight away. They came in within the first 5 seconds. You hold other people accountable. No, he wasn't listening, because I literally just told a story that I held myself accountable. And that's what happens in conversations sometimes as well. Go for it, bro.
Yeah, and again, I think that's why some of the things, it's how you approach a conversation. If you approach a conversation with good faith, then you're going to get a better outcome on both sides, especially if you have a critique for someone. If you have a critique for somebody, I think sometimes, especially if we're giving a direct critique, you got to know your audience, you got to know who you're talking to, and then you also have to temper. The onus is on you, because if you have something to say to somebody directly, then the onus is on you to present the information in a way that you want them to receive it. And I think that's what's happening with Ebony. What I would also say for everybody in the chat is, we don't need to pile on to Ebony. I know everybody may have their own feelings, and I don't want to restrict you from feeling a particular way. But what happens is it's going to be a disparate impact, because not only do you have the host of the channel, Kojo, then you have me, who's also on the panel. It's too many people on one person, so we're going to put her in a place of defense. So again, I get that everybody has their own feelings about what might have taken place between Ebony and Kojo and now me. I would just ask that we just not go after her in the chat, because all you're going to do is pin her against the corner and just make her feel defensive, or we're going to push her away, and then we're not going to be able to have the conversation. So that would be my ask. People can do whatever they want to do. Everybody's grown. Be respectful, but that's just my ask for the context of this conversation, that we would do that. And I think that the point that we're trying to get you to, Ebony, is like, we don't need you to agree with us. right? We just want you to understand how the conversation started and perhaps a better way to do it to get a different reaction. Because ultimately, if the critique came from a valid place, a good place where you just wanted to give Kojo some feedback, then the next time perhaps you want to do that because you are an active member of this channel, there's a better way to go about that to get a different response, right? Hear him out and, open up the door. Hey, Kojo, did you feel like you critiqued? There's different questions you can ask or different ways you can go about it. If you truly want to get a response or give Kojo some feedback or anybody some feedback about what's doing, you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, that's how the conversation went left. And to a certain extent, as much as you may not have intended to, go in or thinking that you were going in, you did open up a door where it started to get contentious because you put him now on the defense, talking about his actions, saying that he overanalyzes too much. He needs to correct himself before he starts correcting other people. He does that too much. Is that feedback that's going to make someone feel good that's hosting a channel? And then also the topic is around sensitivity. You get what I mean? So just put it all in context and say, hey, could I have done that better? Could I have done that better? And that's all we're saying.
And actually, that's actually something that when I had a conversation with my friend, I had to do as well, right? Which is, in the midst of the situation, I had to apologize for the impact, because that wasn't my intention, right? So me, getting into a temper tantrum wasn't trying to anything, but the impact of what I did to my friend is why I had to apologize. You get what I'm saying to you? Again, these are all things that you start to, when you want to be more aware of how you impact people, you try to open yourself up to the different aspects, right? Like I said, I thought I was right in my situation in terms of how I felt, but the impact to my friend of what that millisecond of behavior is what she's also now remembering, right? Now, someone might look at it and go, it's manipulative, women are manipulative. And I looked at it as, it's not manipulative, it's that is how she's impacted by what was done to me. You know what I'm saying to you? And so it's a case of, some people can be used as manipulative, of course, right? And just like when men say facts over feelings can be used as manipulation too. But the reality of the situation is, when it comes to your relationships with the opposite sex, especially as a man, I don't want you to look at that someone saying that, just because you weren't that wasn't your intent, that there wasn't an impact. There can always be an impact. So that's why I had to apologize to my female friend. And I was like, yo, I apologize. It wasn't my intent for, my anger to make you feel the way it did, and the way I expressed it. So I apologize for the impact. But again, then you go on to talk about how I felt and et cetera, right? So it's about removing the ego and the pride from the conversation. And when you're too sensitive, and when I say too sensitive, I'd rather use a different word. When you're wounded, because I think that's a better word than using sensitive, because it's a very broad word when we say sensitive. But when you're wounded and you don't know how to regulate very, very well, what will happen is you'll fail to take your ego and your pride out of the situation because you're only thinking about your perspective. And in a relationship, I have to think about both perspectives because I want to maintain the relationship. And I think that's something that is critical if you're going to deal with the opposite sex. Both men and women need to be aware that just because you're wounded, ego and pride has to be taken out of the conversation, because if it doesn't get taken out, all that happens is that somebody wins and somebody loses. And I was reading a book called Highly Conflict People, and people that are very highly conflictuous tend to make situations win or lose. When you start making it win or lose, well, we both lose, because if I really wanted to keep the relationship, all that's going to happen is your resentment is going to build up if you keep losing. Right? And if I keep winning, I may feel good, but you're going to feel bad. In the end, I'm still going to lose because I want the relationship to win. So when you're trying to make your relationship last, I cannot stay in the win-loss situation. So really, when I was looking at that situation, I really was praying about it. I was like, God, how do I handle this effectively? Because I'm pissed. And I promise you, if I'm left to my devices, I'm going to cane her again verbally. I'm going to say something that's going to wreck the thing. because how I felt was I felt like I was wronged and disrespected. But once I got that prayer in and I was like, okay, let me settle down now. Let me voice how I felt. Okay, now I'm okay. Let me try and see if there's another perspective. Let me try and be open to another perspective. I have my feelings. I will discuss it. But is there another perspective before I go deeper and jump down the rabbit hole even further and maybe potentially cause even more tears or cuts in the relationship that may become a huge gaping hole later on in the relationship? Let me see if there's another perspective. And once I had that conversation, she gave me a different perspective. I didn't see it that way. I spoke to a friend and she was like, yeah, there's a different perspective. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't see it that way because I saw it from my perspective. And then by having that gap in there, it just meant that I can now see another perspective. And the way I handled it was much more different than it would have been if I hadn't taken that time to. So yes, being wounded and not being able to regulate it very well, quote unquote, someone might say a negative aspect of being too sensitive, can lead you to a place where it doesn't help the relationship. So yeah, go for it, Sean.
Yeah, and I know I've told this story. What's up, Corey? I know I've told this story on this channel before. And I remember when my ex-wife and I were in couples therapy, and our therapist, just talked to us about the way we would argue. And he mentioned that every time you argue in such a way where it's combative, you're ripping a piece of paper, right? It's like tearing off a piece of paper. And yes, can you tape that little shred back together and the paper is still the same size? Yes, but the more you keep tearing away and putting back together, you're going to lose the integrity of that piece of paper, and it's not going to be the same. And at a certain point, you're going to have so many tears that it's very hard to put it back together. Hence we divorced, right? And I mean, that wasn't the exact 100% reason, but it was a big part of it. And I think that's something that I always carried with me after the fact as a learning lesson, to just think before you engage in a heated argument, because can you make a mistake? Yes. But if you continue a pattern of going after someone and it's hurtful to the person, might not be hurtful to you, but if it's hurtful to that person, you're tearing away at it. You're tearing. And you can begin to do damage that can be irreparable. And, we just need to be more cautious in the way we communicate and have a level of sensitivity. And again, that springs back to the empathy that the brother was talking about in the beginning of the video, that we want to have. And that is important to have a healthy balance in the relationship.
Love that, man. Black, I don't know if you how much of conversation you've caught so far. The original question was obviously, do women want men to be sensitive in 2024? But I guess we kind of springed into some other aspects of conversation, talking about men and women kind of dynamics and conversations and stuff like that. I don't know if you had a position already in just what you've heard and wanted to add to it before we go any deeper, but go for it, Bram.
Yeah, what I heard is that that men should be sensitive. And I do believe that we should be sensitive, but I think there's a cap to how sensitive we can be. There's occasions where sensitivity is not really respected by women in a sense. And what I mean by that is you can cry, but you can't make a noise. I've heard that before. Like, you can cry, but you can't make a noise when you cry. You can drop that tear, but it's okay. I've heard that before. Because a woman is going to respect a man who can gauge that sensitivity well. You have to be a man who is in tune with himself to know how much sensitivity to give and how much to kind of pull back, depending on what relationship you're in. And I don't look at it in a sense of playing games, but I do know that every woman is different. So your 10 at sensitivity may be her 3. And if she wants you to go higher than that 10 that you already are at, I'm sorry for you. This may not be for you because I can't give you much more than that. I'll give you my 10. If you need more than that, I'm sorry for you. You know what I mean? But it's just that just the interaction with men and women, there should be a level of sensitivity in regardless of what kind of relationship you have, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a business relationship, but anytime you're including someone else outside of yourself, the perspective of that other person has to be taken into consideration. So that does mean that you have to be a little bit more sensitive to what they're asking for, what they need, their side of the coin, how they feel. you have to take all that into consideration. So that part I did get from you guys. I don't know which way you want to take it, Kojo.
Let me ask a question then, because some sections of the internet may say, but men don't have to bend to women's will though. Why do men have to bend to be sensitive women? Women, you know what I mean? Like, this is how we're in the situation we're in right now. Men are bending to women's will and being all emotional and da. I'm not going to do that. What would you say to that person who said something along those lines?
Well, really, to be honest with you, sensitivity is not really for the other person; it's for yourself. You have to allow yourself to take yourself to a different place. And I'm not being sensitive per se for a woman, but I can gauge it depending on what she needs and what my needs are. That's an ability to do so. That doesn't mean I have to do it, but I'm being sensitive because it's just within human nature for us to have that softer side. And sometimes people don't really understand that. They expect a man to be hard 24/7, face the world, come home and still be hard, going through all that. But we weren't really meant and built to be that way. So I say that to say that, it's not really about the other person. It's about yourself. You have to give yourself some grace, some understanding, some sensitive time. You know what I'm saying? Where you like, hey, you look back on your life and you may, like, man, I could have did something different. May get sensitive about the decisions you made or whatever the case is. But it can be that. But it's more for yourself than the other person and your ability to do it.
What's your thoughts on that, Sean? Some brother says, I ain't bending a woman's sensitivity. It's how we're in the situation we're in right now. You guys are simps because you're trying to bend to women's sensitivities. This is why y'all ain't no masculine men.
Well, I mean, I think you just the same when you're trying to communicate a message. You just have to know your audience. And I think our vulnerabilities and sensitivities can be weaponized, right? So just like, depending on, if we have tears to shed, when and who we choose to share that with and what woman we choose to share that with is very important. Not all women are safe spaces for that. So if you really don't know enough about her, then you want to pick and choose. So whether that makes us a real man or not, hey, you do you. But I think that we also need to be cautious, because if you don't know if that person hasn't proven themselves, that they won't weaponize that, weaponize that vulnerability that you're sharing with them or use it against you in the future, then you're good. But if they will, then you need to be cautious. And it's something that needs to be examined, because we shouldn't be weaponizing our feelings, one to another. And I'll actually share with you, I was having a conversation with my therapist. This was some years ago, like right around the time when I was going through my divorce. And I talked to him about that. And even my therapist, who was a Black man, said, are women actually capable of not weaponizing our feelings with them? I was like, not my therapist. Not my therapist being cautious about sharing his feelings and saying that, he too can, there's moments that, he feels that women do that. So I just found it to be really interesting. I was like, wow, but it is a thing. When those things come back up, the person is like, oh, remember that time when X, or you'll be vulnerable and you'll share about an experience from your past and it gets thrown back in your face. So I think we do need to definitely be cautious. It doesn't mean you're always going to prevent it. And sometimes there's an opportunity to really call that person out for their behaviors, right? Call the woman out. Hey, look, I don't know if that's your intention, but when you do that, that now you're doubling down on the hurt, and really looking to inflict pain. So if that's what you're trying to do, then we got to do something different. And I think that's where emotional intelligence comes in, and to just not taking that first hit and being reactive, but letting the person know, repositioning back and setting a boundary for the behavior that's not good. But yeah, no, we do. I don't care what anybody says. You need to be careful with your vulnerability. As a man, our sensitivities can be weaponized against us, and whether it's in our relationships or just in the real world, because we just haven't gotten to a place as a society at whole where we're comfortable with men having that aspect, or showing a vulnerability like that.
You know, I've had situations like where sensitivity that you show a woman, they look at that as you really caring, you being really in the relationship because you gave a vulnerable side of yourself. When you show that side of you to her that she's never seen before, she thinks at that point the relationship becomes real. It becomes real for her because you don't get that in most men. You don't see that side come out in most men, most relationships. So it can be a good thing, but like you said, it can be used against you as well. But it's also used as a tool to gauge how serious you are about the relationship or that person.
Yeah, and listen, maybe we can have a conversation about that. Hopefully, it doesn't go left. But you know, I think there's maybe again partly experience, partly what my dad's told me, partly, you know, yeah. I want to say, you know, I think for us as men, I think it's oftentimes about the expression of the sensitivity that usually is a killer impact, right? It's expression, and this is why sometimes men will choose more. Men will choose more. How do I say? "Quote unquote" less vulnerable emotions to display when really they are vulnerable. For instance, I'm afraid, but I'm gonna be angry, right? Or, you know, if I'm sad, but I'm gonna show you frustration, because the mindset is if I show a vulnerable quote unquote, and by the way, emotions necessarily don't have you know, negative, positive. It's how they applied in the action that oftentimes brings the impact. But you know, if they display a certain emotion, they're afraid that it's going to make them look weak and make them look vulnerable, and it could be used against them. Now, of course, vulnerability is about being weak. That's the whole point. It's about being able to show a little bit of that weakness, right? And so, but I think from my own experience, what I've seen, and I just exercise caution in expressing all sensitivities. I just exercise caution. I guess because I've seen it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 too many times, whether it's my own or others, that when an argument gets to a low point, your ass that was crying at Titanic that time could be used against you in an argument. Now, again, I'm being facetious because really and truly, I'm gonna cry at Titanic, and if you use that against me, I don't care. But it's gonna be something that that's gonna hit home. And I think, I'm not saying that all women do this, by the way. Now, I'm sure some women are gonna say they haven't done it before, and I'm not trying to make this a whole thing, right? I just think a lot of us have had an experience or seen it from others where the soft space where you were vulnerable and you showed something that you hadn't shown the world, but you showed that woman, can be used against you. Now, does that mean I don't communicate and be vulnerable with you? No. It does mean, though, I think I need to be measured, and I need to be cautious about what information I'm going to share. So, like, I always say this, like, I barely saw my dad cry. I barely did. You know what I mean? But he used to tell me he did cry. He cries in his bedroom or in the shower, and you don't hear nothing, you don't see nothing, right? There are times, and again, please don't excuse the example, the analogy. I'm not saying women are children. There are times when parents are going through things, right? Financial hardships. What is telling me going to do? I'm a kid, I can't do anything about it. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm only going to worry. Do you get what I'm saying to you? So the parent tries to protect the person from telling them certain things because it may not be beneficial in that point in time. So I do believe that even though I believe I should share a lot of what I think and I feel, I must also exercise caution in what I share and how much I share and what the impact of me sharing that will do. You get what I'm saying to you? And how I share that particular instance. Again, I don't want to go too far because that's how men then go down a completely different lane. Don't share nothing. Wife finds out you're now in £100 million debt. You now begging her to help you out. Like, that ain't what we're asking. But we're saying that there are some times where you have to measure it. And it's hard for me to determine for any man out here what is the breaking point in sense of, or I should say the barometer for you. You know what I mean? I think you got to know your woman, and you got to know what she's like. You got to dwell with her a little bit, get to her understanding, know how she gets, because I think all of us have different levels when it comes to it. But I do exercise caution about, especially things like crying. I'm gonna cry in my bed when you're not there. I'm gonna cry in my room when you're not there. I'm gonna cry when you can't see me. Okay, but when I come back out, you ain't gonna see nothing. Okay, I'm back to business. We need to handle what's happening, and we go forth. I don't know. How do you men feel about that particular statement there?
Interesting. I think there is a such thing as masculine sensitivity, and I think that's kind of where you're going, Kojo. When you say what you say, it's like, you have to be a certain way to the eyes, and you have to be a certain way behind closed doors. That freedom of that cry, or that freedom of that thought, or just thinking back on something that you could have done better or different or whatever that got you in the place you're in, whatever that may be. I think it's healthy to have that. But at the same time, being too sensitive, overly sensitive, can expose you to a situation that you're really not prepared for, when, especially in a relationship, because women have been complaining mostly as of late about their men not being masculine enough. And I think there needs to be a clear line of where masculinity lives and where sensitivity lives, because a man is being sensitive about a particular thing does not mean that it's his character, does not mean that's his personality, who he is. That means he's sensitive about a particular thing. And I think what makes a man masculine is his ability to know himself, know what he stands for, and stands 10 toes down when it comes to his beliefs and how he wants the relationship to be structured, as a man. But I think that what you said is about having to cry, like I said, behind closed doors, is something a lot of our fathers had to do, and people that, older generation had to do, because they didn't want to take that chance and having that partner see that and then it be judged by that action. So yeah, we got it, Sean.
Yeah, I just think it's just, you just really have to learn how, and this comes from emotional regulation, and also just some past experiences, and then also what's expected of us. To me, I did see my father cry, as a child and growing up, before he passed away at 16. But it wasn't like I saw him crying just in regular everyday experiences, right? There were moments where, something happened, and he was expressing a feeling, and it wasn't like in a public setting or something, or he wasn't arguing, but I saw him being able to emote was the important part. And, one of the things that my dad, and I think for men, we're going to use that, either it's our father or the men that we've had in our lives, or what we saw as a model, to kind of, you know um, that's kind of the blueprint for us. And unfortunately, if we don't have that in our lives, then it's going to kind of throw it off a little bit. But I would say that me seeing him helped me to understand and be okay with expressing emotions and vulnerability, because it's like sometimes, like, you'll talk to guys who don't express their emotions. It's almost like they feel like they don't have them. It's like, bro, if you have them, trust me. They're there. You're just expressing them in a different way, or you're pushing them down and not dealing with them, and then they're coming out in another form. So you can't just pretend it's not there and just push it to the side, because it is there. It is about having a healthy expression of that particular emotion. But yeah, no, I think that you got to pick and choose those moments. Again, I know enough to know that, if you talk to many of the women in my previous relationships, they're not going to be like, oh, I saw Sean crying all the time. No, but some may have not seen me cry at all. But my ex-wife saw me cry, and it wasn't at a funeral. It was because I was upset about something, or something didn't go the way that I would have liked it to go, and I was really deeply hurt by it. So I cried. And then shout out to her. She covered me and held me and just let me have the moment. And then we moved on in about 10 minutes, because that's the other thing. It's like, how do you deal with that? Like, I don't want you to, oh, poor baby. Like, that's not what we need. Just give us the outlet, let us get it out, and we'll move on. And if there's something that has to do with you, we'll say it. If not, let me have my moment. But I think that is a part of it. I think, just to spin back to the topic as I conclude, I think that the sensitivity has been weaponized against us a little bit. I will say that. I don't want to stir the conversation up, but it has been weaponized, and it's a way that women don't have to hear us. Right. So they just say, oh, men are sassy, all these sassy men's apocalypse. Right. And yeah, are there some men that are taking it to the next level and are being wildly, disrespectful, or taking it to the extreme and going in unnecessarily? Sure, there are. But, don't just do that. And then you don't make it a safe space for any man that is talking about their feelings, being vulnerable, or any of those other things.
I hear it. Okay.
Okay, guys. What do you do? I'm gonna ask you guys a question. What do you do in a situation where you're in a relationship and something's on your mind? Life, whatever's on your mind. Your woman comes to you and asks, "Hey, what's wrong?" And you say, "Nothing." Like you don't want to share it because of a big thing here. It's like, if there's nothing you can do, some similar to what Sean was saying, and Coach O was saying, if there's nothing you can do to help or to remedy the situation, I'm not going to bring that type of stress onto you. I don't know if you guys ever had a situation where you had to pretend like nothing was wrong just so you don't have to show that vulnerable side, because I think oftentimes there are some women, not all, but there are some women who say they want that in a man, but once they receive that, can you truly deal with it? Can you embrace it the right way? So that's why we really don't want to take that chance and being a little too open with our feelings.
I think also as well, do you know what it is? Men and women really do react to things differently, right? Because I think, okay, so for instance, let's say you got a situation, let's say you got a situation that's happening to you, right? And there's nothing the other person can genuinely do. We don't necessarily, let's say we tell our boys, I might tell you black and you black, all right, cool, I hear it, because men, we understand men, right? I think we struggle in that area because we don't actually have a point of necessarily experience in setting a tone for a conversation in that particular department or arena, right? Because again, we don't often, as men, whilst we do talk about things expressively, it doesn't typically run onto emotional aspects, right? So, for instance, let me put it this way, right? If I'm gonna have that kind of conversation now, maybe when I was younger, I wouldn't have done it. I'd just be like, take my dad's advice. I ain't saying shit, okay? But now I'd have been like, okay, do you know what? It's what I need from you is I need to set the tone to say, I don't need a solution. This is actually what we tell women. This is what women say they want from us oftentimes, right? We have to also be aware of how to set that tone too. Babe, I don't need an answer and I don't need a solution. But I do need you to hear me in this moment. I've got some things that's going on right now. I want to share with you. I'm already sorting it. I'm already on it. I've already got some solutions that I'm going with, right? If anything else pops up that I haven't got it sorted, I will come back to you and talk about it again. I think when you set the tone that way, right, it just sets a precedence for the conversation. I think, but what's difficult is that we often don't, because as men, we tend to think, we're men, so we're thinking as men. So when we talk to each other, we can tell from an instant, my brother just wants to vent, man, let him vent, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, we might say, brother, I need to talk to you about the situation. It's mad. Once I hear that, I know that you want to vent. I know you don't need my solution. You know what I'm saying to you? You just want to get it out. Or maybe your wife is annoying you. So you're like, brother, my wife is pissing me off. And I know from that tone, that instantly means he just wants to vent. He doesn't need me to give him a solution. He just wants me to hear him out. Maybe say a couple things in there like, brother, yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, bro, but you know what I mean? And I think that now we are getting to that place where we're talking about, where we're saying that men should be coming forward to be more communicative, right? We also have to learn our way of being able to set tone for our conversation so that we can also retrieve what we need to retrieve from that situation, which is, I'm gonna tell you, listen, I don't need a solution. I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to hear me out. I want to level set the conversation from a jump, because what I don't need is oohs and ahs, and I don't need, baby, I don't need that. I want you to know that I'm already on the process of trying to get it sorted. Or if I haven't got it sorted, I'm not asking for you to jump in there and save me. I want to be able to figure this out. But I've got to be able to communicate that to her and let her know that perspective. Because again, like I said, I think men oftentimes understand other men. So I think it's about level setting the conversation, letting her know. That's what keeps them safe, because they know that if you're willing to level set the conversation and put those parameters in place, it's like you've already thought about this. Then you're just trying to voice out how you feel, and that keeps them at a particular place as well. I think personally, that would be my solution to the situation. If we are inviting men to have more communication with their partners, I think that's the best way to do it. Level set the communication.
Definitely, what you're saying is absolutely key. A man needs to be able to speak to his woman and say, what he needs, what he doesn't need from her when saying what he's saying. But if a man has never experienced a woman not being able to do those things you're speaking of, it's going to be harder for him to do that. So now the woman has to now decide whether she wants to put in that work, that energy, to convince that man that, listen, I am a safe space. You can come in and talk to me. So that can be, kind of tough for some men, because we go based off what we've experienced a lot. So we also go off what we haven't experienced. So we haven't experienced something, it's hard for us to let go and to give in to certain areas. So that is where the work needs to be done. And some men can't really self-identify that. And sometimes in a relationship, a woman can see it, but is she willing to put that work in, or be to have that patience with that man until he can get to that point where he feels more vulnerable around her?
Yeah, go for it, Sean.
Yeah, no, I think that, look, I think are there going to be some things that we're just not going to share? I think so. I don't know, and maybe I still have work to do, perhaps. But I just think some things you can keep to yourself. I think look, everybody is different, but I think I might be having a problem, but I don't necessarily need to speak it out, because we're all human. And I don't think of people like, oh, just because you do something that hurts me means you're toxic. I don't think that way. I think sometimes people just unintentionally do things. And I just rather not be bothered with it. And, sometimes I don't even want to, if the person can't just listen to me, and I know that there's the woman I'm with, or if it's a friend, I know they don't have the capacity to just listen. Some people and they don't mean anything by it. Like, they just want to help. Like, there's women in our lives, and we've all interacted with them, where they just want to help. They want to fix. They want to try to figure out a way. And sometimes I just don't want the help. And, I might be wrong. Maybe you can really provide a solution to me that is truly helpful. But sometimes I just don't want it. Sometimes I want to go through what I want to go through for myself, and I want to be the one to figure out the solution so that I can know for the next time how to deal with it. And I think, look, everybody has a certain way, but I think we should have an outlet. I think I've built up a nice core of good, close guy friends in my circle, where I probably would go to one of my dudes first. Before, with certain things, especially if it's like, oh, I'm trying to figure out, a job situation, because especially if you're in a relationship with the woman and you're the provider, they're going to have a hard time if you're saying, hey, listen, I lost my job, I need a job, or, I'm trying to find a better job, because in their mind, no matter what, they're still thinking about how they're going to be impacted, right? Because if you don't do X, it's going to impact them. And as much as they want to be there for you, listen, unless you have a woman that is totally selfless and you've seen examples of it and that man feels safe, go for it. But for me, sometimes I just like to keep it to myself until I've kind of had a different plan and I can say, hey, listen, this is where I am. So those are my thoughts about that. I think you just got to pick and choose your moments. And sometimes it's okay to not express it.
I agree with you, Sean. I think it's unrealistic for anyone to believe that you can be 100% vulnerable with one person. Like you just said, you can tell your woman certain things, you can tell your homeboy certain things, they may be completely different things. Like, I can never say this to my woman, or I can never say this to my homeboy, but the vulnerability is still there. You still having your time to have those type of discussions, but it's not with just one person. And I think that you're setting yourself up, honestly, because everyone is going through something. Man, woman, whoever you are, everyone has gone through something where trust has been lost because of you trusting someone too much to do this or to do that or to understand this or that. And because we have those experiences, we can't fully feel comfortable being 100% vulnerable with that one person. Now, I think that's an issue. I think that is something that it doesn't have to be, but unfortunately, the way things are in just real life, the world, we do have to hold back a little bit.
I hear you on that. I definitely hear you on that. Like I said, I think there's an image of projected strength that needs to also still come into play. That's why I'm saying that it takes wisdom. All of this we're talking about also is wisdom. It is wisdom to understand when to apply certain knowledge at a certain time. And that is why emotional intelligence is important, emotional regulation is important, because they actually affect your decision making. So like Sean said, when men say that I ain't got no emotions, I'm scared of you. I'm scared of you because this ain't war. You're in a relationship. Now, if you was in war, I might be okay with you because you got to do what you got to do. Be cold-hearted in that place. I'm going to follow you to the end of the earth. But if I'm in a relationship with somebody, I don't need you to be cold-blooded. I need you to actually be warm-blooded. I need you to understand how things can affect people and how there are different nuances to certain situations. And that's why, as a man, you want wisdom. You need wisdom because it actually helps you to be able to apply certain knowledges at the right time. So you're right. There are going to be, for instance, me mentioning money issues. I have to be aware that if I mention money issues, do I have an idea or a plan or thought process? Am I? And here's usually the issue. It's not the money issue that's the issue. The issue usually is that you've never shown good acumen in this area. That's what scares people, right? Because if I have a good boss and they tell me, listen, right now, guys, I don't know what we're going to do, but he's always come through, you're going to be like, all right, we're going to figure it out because you've always figured it out. But if you ain't got a good acumen and your past history is telling us, look a bit shady with the way that you operated financially, yeah, we all going to be scared. Because you haven't operated in a correct manner. People get afraid when they see patterns of behavior and then they see it coming out. So if you have a good pattern of behavior when it comes to financial acumen, yeah, you might say, listen, hey, it's looking a bit scary right now. I'm not gonna lie to you right now. The finances are looking X, Y, and Z. I won't lie to you, we're going to have to cut back some things. Yeah, people are going to feel some type of way, but they're going to know that, but this person has handled things in the past. They have a good acumen. They've handled things correctly in the appropriate manner. People can have confidence in that spare arena because they know that you have a good history. Usually the shakiness comes from bad history in that area. Or there is an insecurity previous that the partner has already that, for instance, we saw this, I think, on Married at First Sight with, what's the old girl's name? I forgot her name. Leg was shaking when he was talking about money. I can't remember her name. A couple of seasons back. But I can't remember her name. It'll probably come to me a little bit later. But her leg was shaking when they were talking about money because she cannot think about poverty. She just cannot. Like money issues, she cannot. So her leg was shaking when she talked about it. Now, I think the girl with Gil was Miller. It was Miller. There's already an insecurity there. So the moment you mention financial issue, the leg is going to be shaking again. You know what I mean? Even if you have a good acumen. So so I think in a situation, what I would say is there needs to be some wisdom, there needs to be some understanding, there needs to be some observation too. If you know, and this is funny as well. So for instance, my mom is a warrior, as in she worries. I don't need that. If I'm trying to figure some ish out, I really don't need you worrying. So maybe I'm not going to tell you this information yet, because where it is on the scale of solutions, I can't handle your worry. I need to be focused and targeted. So I might not tell you at point A, but I might tell you at point D, because at that point I'm more comfortable. I know what I need to get done. I have a plan in place. And so at that point I can alleviate all your worries. But if I tell you at point A, I have to know that you're a warrior. You worry, and you're gonna worry me. And that's going to make me stressed, and then I can't focus on what I need to focus on. So again, it goes back to our original conversation talking about being sensitive as a man. It's good. You should understand the sensitivities of your other partner, what triggers them, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, so that you can operate in that information. And this is why emotional regulation is important, because sometimes you're stressed about something, but your mouth want to run. And maybe your mouth doesn't need to run at this moment. Maybe you need to keep it to yourself, regulate it for a little while, hold on to the information for a little while, and then move forward. Before, right? So you can understand, it's not about hiding it. I'm not talking about hiding it. I'm talking about an appropriate time and season to release that information. I think that would be a more wiser counter step to make, ideally, again. But it all depends on the situation. If you're about to lose your house, you might want to tell your wife. You might want to tell her at point A. I don't know if you guys have an addition to that.
Yeah, I think that to your point, right, it's not about keeping someone in the dark. And I think, and I'm definitely not a fan of keeping someone in the dark, especially about something that directly impacts them. But I think depending on where you are in it, sometimes you got to flesh things out. This is something I've learned most recently. Like there's layers to it. And we often need to see people in black and white, and people are rarely black and white, right? They have layers. Just because somebody does something not so good doesn't make them all bad in this area, right? You might have a woman who is really a very supportive, very loving, but this is a particular area that she's not really good at this, right? So if you talk to her about this, she can give you the best advice on this, but maybe if you come here, you just know that that's something that's going to make her uncomfortable, or that's something that's going to make her a little uneasy because she wants to make sure that you're okay. Right. So if you have somebody like that, then you want to make sure that you're tempering how you share what you need to share. And unless you two have worked through that issue, then you're going to have to, maybe not tell her when you're right at the beginning of something, or if it's just a thought you have, because I've seen that happen. Like you can be really supportive in this, but if I tell you this, it's just going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make her a little bit uneasy. So it's not necessarily something that she can handle. Doesn't make her bad, doesn't make her not a good partner. It just means this particular area, she's just might not be the best at that. So you want to flush it out a little bit before you present it to her, or it might not even be an issue. Look, people are imperfect. Just like you just don't know how somebody's going to react, but if you have a history with that person, then sometimes you just got to be, you got to keep it to yourself until you're able to do that. And I don't think it makes you bad or her bad. And I don't think it's, because I saw that in the chat, like you got to get somebody that, compliments you. Yes, that's true. But that doesn't mean the person is perfect. And that the person is definitely going to make some mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. She's still going to make mistakes. We're all going to do that. We're on this journey of figuring things out. So sometimes you have to protect yourself, because certain hurts, and this is where it comes back to men and sensitivity. Men, when we get hurt, it lingers very long. And this is why, the rate of men eliminating themselves, I'm trying not to say the S word, because that word, can get banned on YouTube, but that's why we do it more, because when we experience pain, because we haven't been necessarily taught to let it out, but when we get hurt, it sits with us longer. and sometimes it's hard for us to recover from that hurt. So it's in certain instances, it is best for us to us protect ourselves from that hurt if it could happen, and keep certain things to ourselves before we let it out, and then the person hurts us, and then it's going to be an irreparable hurt, or something that lingers longer than it really needs to be. So I think that that's something to be considered too.
I'll just say this, man. I think that women, a lot of women are some great problem solvers, because they've been having to solve problems all their lives. You know, even single mothers have to do the same thing, have to make a way, right? I respect all of that, but in the relationship aspect of it, you still have to show me how you resolve your own issues. So if we're having a conversation and you're vulnerable enough to explain the situation that you're in, and you're walking me through how you resolve it or how you're thinking about resolving it, and I'm like, you know what, that's pretty smart. I like that. I like the way you came to the conclusion of that. Then that's going to make me like, okay, maybe I can talk to you about some things that I have going on with me. It's really about show and prove. Really, you know, you have to show, a man has to show you that he's worthy of you in his own way. You know, you have certain demands that a man should have to show you as a woman, but we need the same thing from our women as well, to show us different sides of you that can be something that can be useful to us in our lives. You know, just like we want us to be useful to you and yours. So when I say that, it sounds like a tit for tat in a sense, but I personally work better when I see the vulnerability come from my woman first. When I see that, then it's a back and forth. It's a handshake type of thing. We build, we grow together. Say, for instance, if there's a conversation about something that you've gone through in your past and you can identify with it, that she shares her experience, you share your experience. Okay, now you have something you can bond over, something that you have in common. This is how relationships build and grow together, by the experiences that we have and experiences we're able to share. It's just unfortunate. I will say that about myself, that it's unfortunate that I'm built in a way where the vulnerability has to be shown to me first before I can be vulnerable to someone else. But the woman has to be able to be understanding of that. If not, then, you know, we have to look in a different direction. But I do think it's something that needs to be looked into.
So I think just to answer Cece's question as well, I think you know, it's a good question. So what is the point of having a partner if you try to solve everything on your own and not include them until you have all figured it out? I'm not saying that you should figure out every single problem. What I was alluding to is that I think for us as men, a little bit of wisdom might be that, you know, you might want to consider certain situations, which I can't say 100% what they are, because you need to know your woman and you need to know what they're like. But I would say there are certain situations as a man, you don't jump in and say it straight away. You wait. There may be a time of waiting, a time of observation, a time of just seeing where you are right now in that problem, and seeing then, okay, maybe this is the best time to say something, or maybe it's not the best time to say something. And I was making it very clear that don't wait till you're 10 million pounds in debt and your house is being repossessed and the tow man's come to take your truck away. That's not helping nobody. What I was talking about was, and I think Sean kind of touched a little bit too, sometimes you can jump in prematurely, right? Sometimes you can see some symptoms, but you ain't got the sickness. So now you're jumping in and scaring somebody with all the symptoms that you got, but it actually isn't the sickness. So it's like being very cautious about, especially I believe for as men, that, you know, not to put too much on the person, because the point of the matter is we're supposed to help carry the load. We're supposed to help that, right? So if I'm doing that, I don't want to put more load on you than is necessary. So there are going to be certain situations where I believe that as a man, pause, just use a bit of wisdom, observe, regulate yourself a little bit, and understand, does this information need to come out? I think this one, I need to share this one with my partner. You know, maybe I need a solution, maybe I don't need a solution. And moving that, I'm not saying that because women are a bad partner or they are overly emotional. So I actually wasn't saying about overly emotional. I was actually more saying the fact that I'm not trying to put that worry on you, right? You want to talk about patriarchy? That's what happens. You want to talk about gender inequality? That is also part of it. You want to talk about double standards? That is a double standard. It's unfortunate, but that's what I have to do as a role. That there's a larger There's a larger weight on my shoulders to carry some of that burden in that particular way. So as a protector, sometimes I don't want to say everything. And it's almost like, have you ever seen the video that was going around viral about men and women walking down the street and the man is looking at all the dangers and the woman's just behaving? In fact, if I told you every single threat that was out there, you wouldn't be able to want to live effectively, right? So I can't tell you every single thing. I need to be very careful about what I tell you because I want to make sure the impact versus the intent, I don't miss it, right? So I may have an intent to be transparent and to be open, but in doing so, I'm now putting insurmountable pressure on you inadvertently doing so. So I think it's also about that aspect. So it's not about saying that women are not going to be great partners, or where, seeing them, that we don't think they can bring solutions. Women bring great solutions. And I would advise any man that you should also be tapping into the resource called your wife or your woman, because she sees things completely differently and will have different ideas. So I would never say that you shouldn't use that. If you're a smart man, a wise man, he will tap into the resource called his what? His woman or his wife or his girlfriend, because she sees things differently and will have probably some ideas that can help solve some of your issues. So I think that is all I'm kind of saying. It's cautious. It's being cautious about what information you let slip, because if we're talking about our roles that we play, you are called to be a protector, and sometimes you can't mention every single situation. If a woman was to mention every single woman that keeps eyeing you up when you're out and about on the street, you're gonna get tired. Baby, is it every woman? I saw her looking at you, and I saw her looking at you. Yeah, because she's trying to be protective too, but it's annoying. I don't need you to tell me every single thing. Some things need to wait when they manifest, and the person, oh, baby, listen, she was messaging you, I think you need to stop. That's a different situation. So again, it's not about hiding, or even trying to be deceptive. It's more about being smart about what information is coming out, that comes out your mouth, and being very cautious about the impact it can make on your partner. And many of us as men have experienced that. You said one thing that you didn't need to say, and now that one thing is now being used, or it's now becoming an issue, or it's now the pressure, or baby, I was thinking about this on my head. I didn't want you to think about it. I told you because I just wanted to share it, but now you're thinking about it, and I didn't need you to think about it. Yeah, so that's what I think Sean, and this is why Sean now going the complete opposite way. He's saying, I ain't gonna say nothing, because when we do, what happens is you want to share the load, and in that moment, I don't need to share the load. I don't need to share the load in terms of solving the issue. And my final point on this is also sometimes the reason why too is that you have to allow me to be a man. As a man, I want to solve issues. Let me solve issues. That's what I like to do. Yeah, most men like to solve issues. Have you ever done a jigsaw puzzle and then someone comes on and suddenly starts fixing all the pieces together? Why the hell would you do that? I was making my way. Now what you're doing is you're pressurizing me and telling me I'm not doing it fast enough. I don't want you to do that. I want to have the ability for you to support me. This is a key thing I think for men. Sometimes I don't want you to solve the issue. I want you to support me. Let me solve the issue, and all I want you to do is support me. Rub my back, rub my shoulder, say, baby, you got this. I know you got this. You go ahead and solve it. And that's all I need. I just needed that empowerment. So again, it's not to say that I'm going to not say anything to you. It's also not to say I'm going to tell you every single thing. It's to say I need to find a balance and be wise about what information needs to be said at what particular time. That's why businesses don't tell you that you all are getting fired in the morning, because they know there'll be a frenzy that happens. This is why when a club tells you, please leave safely, they don't tell you there's a fire downstairs, because if they do, everyone runs out and it becomes a frenzy. There are certain things you don't say because it becomes a frenzy in that situation. You've got to be very careful about how you release certain information, okay, in that aspect. Go for it, boys.
I'll be honest with you. When you say frenzy, things can turn into a frenzy. It can happen really, really quickly. When you are explaining something to your partner, there's always details being left out that they want to know about, no matter what. And okay, you say you want to know what's going on. I'm telling you what's going on. Now you're digging even deeper. Now you're asking follow-up questions. Nope, well, that's not what we're doing. You just want to know the reason why. I gave you the why. Now I'm not asking you to resolve this for me, like you said, but when they start digging, because they, you know, they want to know the who, the where, the why, the what, they want to know everything, so they can start going into that mode of helping you resolve it. It's appreciated that you want to help. I appreciate that. Thank you, dear. But no, I got it. I just want to share that with you because this is what you asked for. You know, you asked for me to just tell you, you'll leave me alone about it. Once I tell you that, all I want to do is just know, okay, now that you know, now you want to know more. So we get into that whole ring around the rosy type of thing in a sense.
You know, and I think even the chat tonight is an example of sometimes why we have to be careful of what we share, because as much as people are well intentioned, we bring our previous experiences into it, right? And I saw in the chat, I'm not sure who shared it, but you know, someone shared, like, you know, they saw their dad not share things with their mom, and then that caused some financial disruption in their household, right? So that is an experience that sat with her, of what she saw as an error that her father made, not knowing all the variables, just in terms of the optics of what she saw, or maybe the aspects of what her mom shared with her, but not knowing the 100% full picture. But this has formed her opinion, right? No matter what we say, that opinion, it sits with her. Both Kojo and I made it clear, like, hey, listen, we're not saying wait for the house to fall apart and then share, or withhold things that are going to be critical or harmful. We're saying this time where you just need to sit with things before you share, so you can get a chance to work it out. But no matter what, that feeling that that particular woman had sits with her, because that's part of her experience. So it's very hard for her to remove herself from that experience and hear me in terms of what I'm what's going on with me, because she experiences that through her lens. You know, and so I think that's why it's so critical that we just, sometimes we got to sit on it and be quiet, because no matter how well intentioned you are, when you share experiences with like that with the man, especially if he's not even there yet, it makes us feel like we can't share with you because we don't hurt on you. And we don't want to have to now be viewed from that lens, like we're your father, or we're going to let our house go down in you know, into a bad financial place. So I think that's why sometimes we need to be, you know, sometimes we need to sit and be quiet, because I don't think the person who shared that, whoever that was, meant to be hurtful. But hearing that as a man can hurt us, because it's like, oh, now you don't have faith in me. You think I'm going to let us fail, and I would never do that. So I think this is why we have these conversations, and why they're so important, is because as much as you feel like, oh, I can be a safe space, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're really not. And it doesn't mean men are bad and women are good and vice versa. You know, we just need to be cautious of how our own experiences color our perspectives and shape the view of how we see other people. And sometimes I need to sit in that space and not necessarily share with you, because I don't need to deal with that on top of already dealing with the issue that I'm dealing with. And lastly, I also saw this come up too, and it's like, oh, there's not a lot of men who could talk to men because men don't necessarily aren't emotionally healed or whatever, all this stuff. Wrong. I've gotten some of the best advice from men in my life, friends and otherwise, you know, and we communicate differently. And I think sometimes talking to a man is a lot better because we can understand each other. And I'm not saying every man, but the men in my circle, I can pick up the phone and I can call Kojo. I can pick up the phone and talk to Corey. Corey and I might not talk to each other for a few months, but he could be like, hey, listen, Sean, I'm going through this. I could be like, hey, listen, Corey, I'm going through this. I could listen. Hey, bro, I know you, this was going on. Blah, blah, blah. How are you doing? How's that going for you? You know, and we could like trade back information, and that's it. We move on. And I think as men, sometimes we need that, but you're not a man, so you're not going to get it. So it's okay. And sometimes we do need a different lens of advice or area of support that a woman can give. But I think sometimes men know exactly how to say what, and I'm not talking about a man that's gonna do the same thing, weaponize you, try to like get at you, or try to make themselves seem better than you, or I got more than what you got. Yeah, if the men out there like that, I'm not going to them for advice. They're not really in my circle like that. So I'm not going to talk to them about things. But I would say I know plenty of guys that can talk you through a situation, that can say, hey, listen, this is what happened to me. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but they can be like, hey, bro, listen, watch out, because I've been in a relationship like that, and this is what happened. I'm just telling you, and I think men can receive that a lot better than being looked at in a particular light sometimes that we get faced with when we talk to women.
Hey, I got one for you, fellas. I got one for you. Let's say, for instance, you're in a relationship. Your woman is wanting you to communicate with her how you feel about this, that, and the other. You don't go to her, but you have a female friend that you can talk to about the things that's going on, because that female friend, whether it be a best friend from grade school or whatever, they know you a little bit better. Now, I say this scenario because I asked the woman that's in the scenario who has that man, are you happy with everything else in that relationship? Are you happy with how he treats you? Are you happy with how he supports you? Are you happy with how he supports you financially? Are you happy with those things? Can you give this one thing to another woman or to someone else without it blowing up the relationship? Now, I'm curious to hear what you guys feel in a situation like that. So say, for instance, I'm going to use you in this example, Sean. Hopefully you don't mind, man. You're in a relationship, okay? And Seaway, you and Seaway talk all the time. Seaway gives you good advice and whatnot, but the relationship aspect, what you have over there, it's good. Nothing else is bad. Nothing else is going on, but it's just you trust Seaway more so with those conversations. Do you think that should be an area of concern for both that man and that relationship, or that woman in the relationship?
Wait, ask the last part of your question, because I was distracted in the
No, I was saying, do you guys
conversation.
feel like having that in a relationship can be detrimental to the relationship itself by going to someone else to have those type of conversations and not your partner? Because everything else in a relationship with your partner is fine, but they want to know the ins and outs of your feelings and this, that, and the other, about what moves you, what's on your mind right now. That has your mind in a fog, but you go to somewhere else to get that release from.
I think it's a topic worth having a conversation about. If they feel like, I'm talking too much with my friend about personal things, or things that they wish that I could confide in them about. If that was something they felt, I would want us to talk about it, and maybe see like, hey, listen, why do I feel that way, or why do I go to them versus going to you about a particular thing? I think it's worthy of a topic depending on how it's broached. I think we also have to leave space for people to have friendships. I think that, there's certain things that you have, friendships for. And depending on what it is, there's certain things you might share with your friends. Now, if I was going to my friend about our relationship issues and they expressed a concern with me about that, then yeah, I would definitely respect that. And if that's something that she was uncomfortable with, I would definitely respect that 100%. But if it's other things, like you said, like she just wants to know the ins and outs, I'll have a conversation with her and say, hey, listen, we can talk about things, but maybe not everything, depending, right? So.
What's the question? Because I want to make sure I don't answer the wrong answer.
No, I'm asking, like, if you're in a excuse me, guys. Excuse me.
Bless you,
I'm
bro.
asking if you're in a relationship, and in that relationship, your woman That's the only thing that's missing in that relationship. Your ability to have those conversations with her about the things that are on your mind, the things that you need to fix or need to come to an ultimate decision about. But you have a friend that's of the opposite sex, or just another friend in general that you go to and you talk to about those things, besides talking to your partner about them. But everything else in the relationship is fine. You're okay with how she treats you. She's okay with how you treat her. Everything else is fine. Do you think that will be a problem for that relationship, or for her, or for you in that relationship?
So you're saying that I've got a female friend and I'm telling the female friend things that I need to fix in the relationship.
No. Things that's
what I
on your
mean.
mind. You know what I'm saying? Like when you go
Oh.
home to your woman and she says, "Babe, what's on your mind?" You know what I'm saying? You're like, "No, I'm good. I got it."
Oh.
But you don't talk to her about those things. You talk to your friend about those things because it's her best friend. You had a friend for years or whatever. You're already comfortable in that back and forth. They talk to you, you talk to them. But that element is missing in your relationship. Do you think there will be a problem for the continuation of that relationship or the growth of that
It
relationship?
depends. It really depends on what it really depends on what information is being shared here. If you're going to be sharing things that's on your mind about, things that affect your relationship directly, there's some things that are indirect, right? So there's some things that are affecting your relationship directly. Yeah, I wouldn't advise that unless you're asking for some wise counsel about how to go about a situation. That's slightly different. Let's say like something, an argument's happened between you and your partner, and you're like, I'm not sure how I should go about it. Then that's slightly different. You're asking for some advice in that immediate moment to go and solve an issue. I can see how that happens.
Let's say, let me give you an example then, something career based, like something in your career, it took an odd turn, right? Something what people would normally talk to their significant other about, but you have a friend that you also can talk to about this, but you don't feel comfortable talking to your significant other, or you don't have them there for that reason. You have your friend for that reason to have that conversation.
I mean, I would talk to my partner first, right? I think my natural avoidant tendency would go to my friend, but if I'm, learning and growing now, I would go to my partner first. You know what I mean? And if the partner then, maybe the conversation was not as beneficial as I thought it would be, maybe there was some skepticism, maybe then maybe I might go to my friend like, hey, look, I'm thinking about the situation. What do you think? Maybe my partner was right about the way that she reacted. I don't know, just to get a different perspective. Me personally, I wouldn't go to the friend first on those kind of situations, right? It's a bit like when I had a situation when I was going into YouTube full time. When I was going to go to it first full time, I spoke to my partner about it first, and she was absolutely scared. And you're like, you need to have more subscribers before you can go into it full time, blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? But I told her straight, I'm gonna go and do it. It is what it is, right? And then when I spoke to my friend about it, my friend was very complimentary. Yeah, of course, this is what God has called you to. I know that you're supposed to be in that space. I got two different answers, right? But I first went to my partner first, you know what I mean? But my friend's been there for a very long time and has seen so many seasons. So this is why I'm saying it's not a black and white situation, because that person is no longer just a friend. They're a confidant. Not only are they a confidant, they're also a person who's going to keep me in my relationship. They're a person that also fights for the other person. I expect the person to keep me in the relationship. I don't expect them to be getting me out of it. Do you get what I'm saying to you? So if I'm asking advice, it's not advice, get out of the relationship, coach. It's advice like, no, coach, maybe look at it differently. You know what I mean? Those are the kind of people I can go to for information when these things happen, because their perspective is stay in that relationship, work that relationship effectively. This is what you should have done. This is what you should be doing better so you can improve that relationship. I'm not going to somebody who I know their first thought is, well, you need to be out of that relationship now. That's not a person I'm going to. You know what I mean? Because that person doesn't have my vested interest at heart. But I would first go to my partner first, discuss it with them. And then, I probably have a good confidant as a friend. Yeah, mine is a woman. Someone might say unfortunately. It could be your boy. You know what I mean? That doesn't make a difference. But I'll go to somebody who I know is invested well in me and has spent time with me and understands me very, very well, and that can speak life into me as well, and not going to speak death. So, yeah, I think partner first, friend second. You know what I mean? Yeah. Any other thoughts? That's quite quite an interesting perspective. Because I think to myself that there are going to be moments where certain things are a conflict of interest. And I think is what you're kind of describing. There are going to be some moments where there may be conflict of interest and you can't go to your partner because there's a conflict of interest. You know what I mean? Or maybe you've discussed something previously and you already know their answer to the situation, which still we shouldn't assume, but I'm just saying we are humans. So naturally you may find yourself going to your friend to ask them the question because you're already in that space. So again, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that I can understand that there are going to be moments where there are going to be conflicts of interest and you may ask your friend that question, or you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, so that circles back around to the sensitivity piece of it,
Yes.
right? Because let's say, for instance, that was the way that we decided to go. You just individually decided to go, and your partner finds out that you asked her a question and you went and asked your friend the same question, and you took the friend's advice versus her advice.
How the hell did she find out?
Oh,
How the
my
hell she
goodness.
find out? Who got loose lips like that?
Come on, man.
Who got loose lips like that? Because I ain't saying nothing.
She overhears the conversation. Let's say she overhears the conversation. You're on the phone, right?
You ain't smart.
She overhears that conversation. Why are you asking someone else the same question you asked me? See, that's when it becomes a thing. So my thing is that if you're happy in the relationship, don't make it more than what it needs to be. You know, so the piece of it where you're being sensitive to how your woman feels, you don't want to keep secrets as well, right? You don't want to be like, you know, hey, I'm going to hide this from you, that I'm talking to my friend about the things that matter to me most in my life or whatever. You don't want to hide that. But at the same time, it's like, if you don't trust your partner in that area, but everything else is going well, is that something that is truly needed for the success of your relationship? For me to just tell you everything that's going on with me, or the thoughts that are on my mind, and this, if there's nothing that you can do to, if it doesn't affect you in any kind of way, if it's only on me, then it should be my decision on who I can have that conversation with. So what's the difference between, to be honest though, what's the difference between me having a conversation with you, my friend, or my mom? It's still somebody different, right? So it's just about the fact that if I have a conversation with my mom, I say, yo, I was talking to my mom about this, and she was thinking this, and I think this is a good idea. Never do I hear a woman say, well, why didn't you come to me instead of your mom? See, that's never a question. But if you go to a friend and say, hey, or you go to a woman and say, hey, I went to my friend and asked them this question, and this is the advice they gave me. It was like, why you didn't come to me? But it's still outside of the relationship. You know what I'm saying? If the feedback is of equal quality, then why can't that be? Or is this just a perfect world that just doesn't exist? I'm sorry. Maybe that's a perfect world that just doesn't exist for men.
Go for it, Sean. You want to answer? He's asking for an early death.
Yeah, I know Corey just likes to war. By the way, Corey has a great book out there, a great ebook out there that he is published. So hopefully y'all can head on over to Corey's page and be able to get that going. Help him sell those great books he has out there. But Corey, we are not going to entertain this foolishness with you tonight. We are not tussling about things that don't need to be tussled about. Some things, it's everybody, although all people are created equal, not everybody is the same, right? And you know that you can go to certain people for certain levels of advice because either they have an area of expertise, or sometimes we're all selfish folks. And I may want to go to a softer landing first because I know if I talk to this particular friend, I know what their likely response is going to be based on past experiences, and I want a softer landing to flesh it out before I get to somebody else. And my spouse may not necessarily always provide a softer landing. And I think this is something, and even our chat proved this, and we're all guilty of it. We think the best of ourselves, and as we should, right? As we should have a sense and a level of self-confidence and have a self-esteem and who we think we are and how we've evolved depending on the level of work we've done on ourselves personally to get to where we are. But no matter what, we're going to shine through. right? There's still certain things that trigger me, still certain things that may upset me, that no matter what, it's still gonna bother me. And there's no two ways about it. And if I'm with any woman that I'm with is gonna know those things, because if she takes the time, she's gonna know me. So there's certain things that are rightfully so for her to probably flesh those out first, if that's the topic she wants to bring in, before she gets around to me, because they're just hot spots for me, right? So I think there's nothing wrong with that. And as well intentioned, as balanced as I think I am, I know I'm not perfect. And I think we as people just need to be the same way. Sometimes women, you guys, as wonderful as you are, you're not always a safe space for us as men. As great as you think you are, and on the wherever on the spectrum you land of greatness, you still have some things that are gonna rub us the wrong way and still make you not safe. So I think it's okay. You can't be all things to all men, and you can't be all things to your man. It can't just be that fixed. Like, oh, I know I got my man's back. No, not with everything, baby girl. Not with everything. And guess what? If you can own your imperfections, we can work with that. If I can own my imperfections, I can work with that. If I'm sitting up here and saying I think I got it all figured out and I know exactly what I'm doing 24/7, there's no room for you to help me. And there's no room for me to help you. Sometimes you got to be confident, and I'm not the right one. I'm not the one to bring this to, because I know how I'm going to react, because that's when you really know what your triggers are. You know your issues. And you sometimes it's like, don't bring it to me. Don't bring it to me yet, because I'm still trying to work through that. And I think that is super, super important, is having that level of awareness of yourself, and also knowing that, hey, look, sometimes you got to leave room for a man to be a man, and a man to figure out what they want to figure out, as much as you think you know better, or you think you can be. If we're telling you you're not, you're probably not, and it's okay. It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you not a good woman for us. It just means, hey, on this particular issue, baby girl, I just need you to fall back a little bit.
Keyword here, wisdom. You know what I mean? I think, again, we'll bring the conversation to a close in a bit, but I think everything here we mentioned is about wisdom, applying the right knowledge at the right time. And I think as a man, that's where you want to be in. You know what I mean? Not every rule is hard and fast, but there are some principles that should be adhered to, and we should also, create space for communication between ourselves, and also to have grace for ourselves, but also at the same time as well to understand we operate in different lanes, men and women. And I want the women to also understand as well, listen, everything that we said here, it's not about limiting women or trying to say women are not great partners. That's why we're saying what we're saying. Rather, it's saying that we're trying to speak from a place of understanding of experiences that both men and women do interpret information slightly differently. And it's not to say that one's better than the other. It's to say that the results that we're looking for may require us to do certain things slightly differently, as well. So, because I believe in the greatness of women, you know what I mean? I want to share certain problems, because I know that, listen, when my wife gets on this, she's going to be on point. If I'm doing a YouTube, I'm like, babe, what do you think? I don't need to hug that space. I'm very well adept at what I do. But when you know what I'm saying, I have a few friends who have said, hey, this. I had one girl say to me, listen, start doing half-an-hour videos. I was like, yeah, I don't know. She said, no, just start doing half an hour, see how it goes. I started doing half-an-hour videos and started picking up the pace. You get what I'm saying to you? Now, if I had said to her, no, I know what I'm doing, you know what I mean? So when I saw that, I was like, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. In fact, when my channel has taken direct increases, considerable increases, just know I've spoken to a woman. Okay? You know what I mean? I understand. You know what I mean? So there are points in situations and in relationships that you have to open yourself up to. You have to speak. You have to share those thoughts and burdens. And there are times where, as a man, I'm going to tell you, shoulder some of that burden. Okay? Sometimes shoulder that burden. It's not the right time to speak yet. It hasn't reached its conclusion yet. It's not the right time yet. You have to assess that as an individual and be sensitive enough to know the times and the seasons when this piece of information might be valuable, or it may be triggering, or it may be, it may be, not necessarily the right time. And True Love Forever says she learned that it's that she can't share everything, and that's not what I don't want you to take that away from the conversation. Yeah, I do appreciate that, but I don't want you to take that from the conversation. What I would hope that I would want you to take from the conversation is that what we're saying is, and we're speaking directly more to the men than actually the women, right? So men who are going to watch this later on, we're hoping that you understand that you apply your wisdom correctly, that you apply your, your wisdom in the right way. And that's why I loved what the men have been saying here today, because it's been, I believe, very constructive. Speaking to the men, letting them know, hey, this is what we're saying. And I think, I think this is what we're saying. And Cece's right. Yes, be balanced. Be balanced in shouldering the burden, because if you do it at the most inopportune times, you're adding unnecessary pressure onto yourself. Absolutely. And Cece, you've been making some great points in the chat. I would say, from what I've seen with Cece's points, adds a different angle to the conversation, because Cece's really stressed about wanting to share the burden. And I totally get it. I do. And I'm sure if we went deeper, we'd understand your background as to why you want to be so on the shoulder. But I want you to understand something, that ideally as men, we do want to shoulder more of the burden, right? And when I say more of the burden, within reason, okay? Because again, our ego, our pride, how we're built, okay, all right? When we talk about equality, it's partly a myth. Because when I'm carrying the shopping and you carrying the same shopping, it's all good at first. But when you get tired, what's the point of having these muscles if I can't utilize the muscles correctly? Do you get what I'm saying to you? Allow us to utilize the muscles and the strength that we have in a most effective manner. And that doesn't mean you can't share the burden. Sometimes you're assuming sharing the burden means having the same position. I don't need you to. Sometimes I just need your hand on my shoulder and saying, baby, you got this. And that is sharing the burden. And that can allow me to go forth and prosper and go and do what I need to do. Now, again, it depends what kind of man you have, because there's a lot of men out there too who don't mind, who want to share the burden. Listen, there's a lot of men out there too. But I think there's a lot of us too as men. We want to lead. We want to be able to protect. We want to be able to provide. And sometimes all I need is just a hand on the shoulder. You know what I'm saying? Maybe a little hug from behind. Say, baby, I know you got this. I just need a little bit of that encouragement and support. And that would do me good. Yes, Sean, I know you opened that mic. Go for it.
Yeah, I always have a story, right? So I'll share an example, and I reference my marriage because it's a significant relationship, and just because it dissolved, I don't think that there's, I'm just prefacing this but there weren't moments where I learned lessons. And I think that's the value in any relationship, whether it exists or it doesn't, is what did we learn? So I remember, my ex-wife was a morning person, and on the weekends, she would be up in the first thing in the morning and want to run her errands and do certain things. I'm not a morning person, right? And the weekends, especially after work, it was my downtime. And that for her she was always wired, let me just get X, Y, and Z. And she used to want to, go to BJ's and do things, and get the groceries and stuff and everything for the household, the stuff that we needed for the week. And I was to be like, babe, I would want us to go together. Let's go together. Let's do it together. And then, I could pick out things and and we're all together. And then, when it's time to unload the groceries, I'm there for you. I'm picking up the things. I'm loading everything. So you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But you know what? For her, it was bothersome. I was in her way. What she liked to do was she wanted to back the truck up into the driveway, and she just wanted, when she got home, for me to unload the groceries, because she had peace of mind, and I had to learn to just leave her be, leave her alone. She was fine in the supermarket. She was actually more productive without me. If there were things that I wanted her to get, just, hey, babe, tell me what you need. This is the list. She was fine with it. She's like, I could do it by myself. Because half the time when we're in it together, sometimes we get to tussling. right? We get to touch Slick and BJ's, you know what I mean? So it's not even worth it. And it worked out so much more smoothly when she was out ahead of me, because guess what? If we were going together, we weren't going to leave at 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning like she wanted to. We're probably going to leave at 11 or 12, which means that pushed everything else back further in the day. And I had to learn to get out of her way and help her where she really wanted to help, which was give me a couple of things that you needed and unload the groceries and everything when I get home. You know, I'm going to text you. I'm 5 minutes. I'll be outside, doors open, driveways cleared. Let's just get the groceries in the house, unpack, put them in the fridge, in the freezer, and move on. And we have the rest of our day. It's actually given her peace of mind, and I have a better version of her. So again, sometimes we think I was well-intentioned. Like, I'm here with you, babe. I'm right by your side. I'm in the grocery store. I'm helping you lift things as you're picking it off the rack. She's like, yeah, but I don't need you there. And I think sometimes we have to learn to accept that. You can't be all things to all people, even your own wife, partner, spouse. And it's okay, because it's about how you navigate to what works best for the both of you. And sometimes you have to get out of your own way. And I think that just was a perfect example of that. It wasn't sensitivity, but sometimes we attach doing things to us. And I wasn't needed. I wasn't needed.
It's mad you tell that story, because I remember with my friend, and she likes to cook, but when she cooks, she doesn't need you in her space, man. That is like one thing that but I'm such a quote unquote people pleaser. I feel uncomfortable being in a space where someone is cooking and they're doing all those things. My natural tendency is to get in there and then start helping to wash dishes or this, that. Because I think in my head, from what I've, when I was the empathetic gene, or whatever you want to call it, of where I want everything to be equal amongst individual people, is like it's always buzzing. So it's always looking to try and be equal. And it's like, you don't realize sometimes that you don't need to try and make up in that moment. I think that's one of the things that I saw, is like my friend would be like, listen, I'm going to cook, I'm going to clean, and I like to clean in a particular way that you can't clean. So I just need you to leave it alone. You sit I feel uncomfortable sitting in the living room knowing that you're doing that, because it feels like someone say misogynistic, man, but I feel uncomfortable. But she was like, no. I like my space in the kitchen. I like to cook. I just like to know that you're there. You know what I mean? Or you can sit in, she doesn't even like to even, because she has an open plan kitchen, so you can just sit. She's like, you can just sit there. I know you're there. And that's all I needed. I don't need you to be too close. I don't need you to be up in my space. Okay? Because this is my space when I'm doing my stuff, and I like it. You know what I mean? And I learned from that moment also, too, to just be able to maybe, different people might require different things. So maybe I need to ask. You know what I mean? Like, hey, do you need me to do anything? No? Okay. All right, cool. I'm going to take your word for it. You know what I'm saying? So in that moment, it's all about what your partner actually desires and wants, or your friend wants from you. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think the other time I was with someone and she was cooking, I didn't lift a finger. Okay. I said, do you need some help? She said, no. I said, baby, do what you got to do. I'm going to sit down. I got on my phone and I started looking at the sports. And I said, damn, this is the life. Right? Now, obviously, at the time, I was still a bit itchy because I feel like I want to get up and help. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I want to lay the table. She said, no, you got it. I got it. I said, all right. Because sometimes we have to understand that when you are trying to serve, it's your ego trying to serve, not you actually trying to serve out of a place of love. Sometimes we are trying to do what Mary and Martha are doing with Jesus. And I always forget who the one is that does it. I always forget the name. If you know the name, put it in the chat. Mary and Martha is a great example of what sometimes happens in relationships. Somebody sits at the feet of Jesus and wants to rest. And the other person's like, I'm going to get up and do X, Y, Z. And Jesus is like, just sit at my feet. Your person has chosen a better path. What I'm trying to say to you is sometimes you want to help me. As a man, you want to help me solve an issue because it makes you feel close to me. It makes you feel like we're a team. But actually what you're doing is you're creating dissension and disunity in that moment, because I don't need you to, I need you to just rub my back. That's what I need you to be. I need you just to rub my shoulder. I just need you to clap me on and say, babe, I know you got this. That's what I need from you right now. And again, the onus is on me to communicate that to you in terms of what I need. And the onus is on you also, too, to respect that boundary and say, it's not about me trying to serve you in that moment. What serves me is that when I said I've got it, let me handle it. Let me handle it. I got it, So I think that works with both people in terms of communication. We need to communicate with the ladies, set the tone and the precedence, and they, too, also, too, follow through with that precedence. And I think it goes on from there as well. So, yeah. You know, servitude sometimes can be out of the ego, and that's my one. I like to serve, and it's like, really and truly is because I feel like I'm going to be inadequate, or you're going to look at me some type of way if I don't do something. It's okay to sometimes rest. You won't be looked at badly. Go for it, Black.
Oh, yeah, I didn't have anything for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll bring the conversation to a good close. I think it's been a really good conversation. So, thank you, Black, for the questions too. It took us a good place actually in the conversation as well. Sean, bring us to a nice conclusion. You know what I mean?
So, thank you for all of those that started with us from the beginning, and for those that came in somewhere midway or other parts of the conversation. We appreciate y'all for listening to us. For anybody watching the replay, just hear us out. And if you really want us to be sensitive, then listening is the first key, right? Hearing us out, hearing what we have to say, and allowing us to flesh our feelings out. And I think the first step in sensitivity starts with empathy. So to have a balanced sensitivity, we need to have empathy, right? And I think that's what we're all looking for. Here is empathy one to another in our relationships. And lastly, super important that we be balanced in the way that we emote. Right? Sensitivity is nothing wrong with it, but we also want to have a balance in the way that we emote and have our emotions regulated, which is super important. And for those men out there that are listening, you want to make sure that where your sensitivity lands is a safe space. And that you have a safe space and an outlet for your emotions, because you do have them, and it is important that you express them just in a safe space and in a regulated way. Back to you, Coach.
Amen.
Listen, ladies, I want to say to the audience as well, those are ladies in the chat as well, I want to thank you as well for just being so respectful and, challenging us as well, and giving some good feedback, pushback, and different perspectives as well. Honestly, even if you feel like we didn't take it all on board today, trust me, we are always listening. As my dad always says, sometimes you're not listening now, but I can see you're listening tomorrow. So sometimes it's not today you're listening, but tomorrow you are. Shout out to the ladies who are always trying to give us a different perspective as well. It does help. It does help in these conversations to have a different viewpoint and an angle, because we're all growing and we're all learning, and no one person has all the answers as well. And I just want to say, we appreciate the ladies as well for that respectful communications. Corey, just let them know a little bit about the book, because you've written an ebook, and the ladies need to get behind and support, and the fellas too.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, the book is entitled Behaviors of an Intentional Man. What it is gives you the walkthrough, ladies. It gives you a walkthrough from the introduction all the way leading up to marriage, how a man conducts himself, what you can look for, the little things that you may be missing. If you're in a current relationship, it'll let you know where you are in their relationship as far as dealing with the intensity out of that man that you're currently with, and what you want to be with, who you want to be with in the future if you don't currently have a man. But yeah, it's just a walkthrough. It just takes you through all of it, meeting the VIPs, what I call VIPs, is your parents, your kids, if you have kids, family members. When does that take place? When do you want to move things to the next level? What does the courting phase look like? How does he want to pursue you? So all of that is entitled in the ebook. It's under 60 pages. It's not a long read, but it's a good read. I guarantee it for you, ladies. Got a great feedback on it. So if you want to know more about it, just follow me on Instagram at Black Made Media. You look at my posts, you see what needs to be done in order for you to get a copy of yours. It is 100% independent, 100% independent. So you won't find it on your Amazon. You won't find it on the Barnes and Noble. It's 100% for me. So I keep all the costs for it, all the hard work that I put into doing it. It goes to me. So I appreciate that, ladies and gentlemen. But I appreciate it also for you, Kojo, and also you, Sean, for mentioning the book. And I appreciate it, guys.
Not a problem at all, big bro. Maybe next one we can even talk a little bit about the book, so that'll be helpful. You know, get some people behind that and get them supporting as well on the channel for you, bro. Not a problem.
Yeah, I love
at
that,
all.
man. Love that. Thanks.
No worries, Cap. Pick a topic and we go. Listen, audience, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a bit of a late one. Myself and Sean woke up from a nap, so this is what we came to, okay? And Corey joined us from his nap too. So, you know, we woke up to discuss some great topics today. So thank you again. I think they're asking where they can find the book and the name of the book. So just if you can put in the chat as well for them.
Yeah, where you can find the book, I'll say it verbally, then I'll put it in the chat as well. What you do is you would cash out me $15 for the book, and in the memo you'll put your email address, and I'll make sure that you get that copy as soon as you send that over. In the memo, like I said, the email address, and that's how you get the ebook.
What's your cash app?
Cash app is Black Made Media. Everything for me, man. Black Made Media, guys. Cash app, Black Made Media, $15. Put it in a memo, your email address, and I'll get it over to you. Thank you guys for your support. I appreciate you guys.
Come on, absolute blessing, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. You know, it's not easy to write a book, so well done on that, Captain, as well. And ladies, if you can support him, fellas, if you support him too, we'd love for you guys to get behind him and support our dear brother Black Made Media as well. All right, listen, audience, thank you so much. We appreciate y'all. Stay locked and loaded. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Okay, we're in 2024. Okay, but we don't want to see anybody building walls. We don't want to see you sliding down them. We don't want to see you jumping them, okay? We've done 3 so far in the last 3 years. In 2024, please, I don't even know what to say about walls again. But, you know, whatever it is, just don't involve yourself in it, okay? But I'll leave you my favorite meme, as always, okay? All right? Yep. See this? This is what happens when you don't listen. If you listen today, you save yourself those tears. But if you listen tomorrow,